Go Figure TV. Revolutionary salute. Revolutionary salute. Like, share, subscribe. Welcome to the House of Revolution. You know I'm your humble host, the Yao Ming of Revolution, Maduro, the revolutionary. Called Trump's bluff. If it's water, Gringo's want his water, they're gonna get World War III alert. Before we get into that, be sure to wipe your feet. That means hit the like button. You in the House of Revolution. Like, share, subscribe, support the platform, y'all. Well, we got to look deep into this Venezuela-U.S. thing. Trump is trying to distract us from Epstein, and they will start a war just to distract everybody from what's really going on.
If we take a look in the past decades, the United States has gone head to head with some of the world's biggest oil producing nations: Iran, Russia, Iraq, and Libya. Now, critics argue Venezuela could be next. With US warships edging closer to Venezuelan waters and thousands of Marines reportedly on standby, the question looms large. Is this the beginning of a regime change in South America? Or is Washington targeting drug cartels under the guise of intervention? And if so, what could it mean for the region and the world? Stay with us. This is the full story. The Trump administration has quietly but steadily built up its military presence near Venezuela. 3 US Navy destroyers and an amphibious assault group are now in the Caribbean, carrying more than 2,000 Marines. The official reason: to fight drug cartels. But critics say that's just a cover. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, one of the loudest voices on Venezuela, recently told Congress, quote, "We must dismantle the Maduro government. This is not about drugs, this is about regime change. Venezuela is not just another country, it's an oil superpower, communist government in the USA backyards that favors China, Russia over American interests. Similar like Cuba. With over 300 billion barrels of proven reserves, it has the largest oil reserves on the planet, bigger than Saudi Arabia." During his campaign, US President Donald Trump once slipped saying, quote, "If I were president, all Venezuelan oil would be American." That one sentence revealed everything. This confrontation is not simply about democracy or corruption. It's about who controls the world's biggest source of energy. But Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro is not backing down. Facing a $50 million US bounty on his head and open calls for his removal, Maduro announced the mobilization of 4.5 million members of the Bolivarian militia, a massive civilian reserve force designed to resist any foreign invasion. In a fiery speech, Maduro said, "We defend our seas, our skies, and our lands. No empire will touch the sacred soil of Venezuela." For him, this is not just survival, it's about resisting what he calls the imperial aggression. Washington claims Venezuela's recent elections were fraudulent. They also accuse Caracas of harboring Hezbollah operatives, running drug cartels, and even allowing Iranian drone factories to operate inside the country. Senator Rubio went further, alleging that Russian and Chinese secret services are already active inside Venezuela.
So what?
To US policymakers.
So what? What if Russian and Chinese secret service was in Venezuela? What damn business of it is these racist imperialists? What business? You're in Ukraine. You're CIA. See what happened? Ain't no fun when the rabbit got the gun. Your CIA was in Ukraine training the Nazis, and you said that Ukraine is a democratic nation. They got the freedom to do whatever the hell they want, even have our weapons and our biological and chemical labs in their country plotting on Russia. America said, hey, Ukraine has the right. But now, see, we heard some Chinese and some Russians was in Venezuela. No. You can't whine about that anymore, bro. I'm going to show you it's way more than that in Venezuela. It's also a bunch of weapons that you cannot deal with, U.S. We're going to get into that. Better stop this.
Because Venezuela is not just a failed state. It is a potential enemy stronghold backed by America's greatest rivals. That brings us to the biggest twist. Foreign support for Venezuela. China has openly condemned the U.S. buildup, warning Washington not to encircle or destabilize Caracas. Since 2007, Beijing has invested over $67 billion in Venezuela, mostly through oil for loan deals. It is now Venezuela's most important partner, both politically and financially. Meanwhile, Russia is doubling down too. Reports from Russian military channels suggest Moscow is preparing to deliver Shahid-style one-way attack drones to Venezuela. Russian soldiers are already believed to be on the ground providing training and support. For both Moscow and Beijing, Venezuela is a front line in the global struggle against the US in this great power rivalry game. This situation feels
both China and Russia. See, they really said no, don't do it on TV, but behind closed doors, they want the US to be dumb enough to attack Venezuela so Venezuela can get in their ass with all them advanced weapons that Russia and China they gave them. They know you lost to the Taliban. They want you to go make this horrible move, crush your economy, put an end to this BS imperialist nonsense for good by attacking Venezuela, which you're going to get your ass whooped. Them ships, they definitely going to get sunk. Don't pull that active aggression, because then China can sanction the U.S. like the U.S. sanctioned. See, if you do this, you the aggressor. Like you call Russia, and China can sanction the U.S., sanction their banks. Just play the same dumb game the U.S. been playing with everybody. That's why Xi Jinping, he be smiling. Boy, they smart. They set a trap for the U.S.
Feels like history is repeating itself. In 1962, the world nearly went to nuclear war during the Cuban Missile Crisis, when the Soviet Union placed weapons just 90 miles from Florida. Now the US feels Russian and Chinese influence in Venezuela, just 1,200 miles from Miami. In the contemporary context, as Russia doesn't want NATO in Ukraine the same way the US also doesn't want Russia and China in Venezuela. It's a dangerous mirror image. Military analysts say the US is preparing for multiple invasion options. By air, increased drone and...
The U.S. want to be in Taiwan. The U.S. want to give Taiwan military weapons and talk about the freedom of navigation and democracy. Well, guess what China going to do? They're going to be all up in Venezuela talking about the freedom of navigation and democracy and giving them advanced weapons. And all the U.S. can do is cry about it.
And surveillance flights near Venezuelan borders, by land, cooperation with Colombian forces to prepare cross-border operations, and by sea, the deployment of 2,000 additional Marines on warships positioned near Venezuela's coast. Caracas insists it is ready, but the balance of power is clear. Militarily, the US holds overwhelming superiority. The real question is not whether Washington can invade, it's whether it can control Venezuela afterward. To be clear, it does not seem that the current deployment of USA is going to retreat empty-handed. Internally, Latin America itself is deeply divided over the crisis. Mexico has rejected any foreign intervention, calling for a dialogue instead of force. Colombia's President Gustavo Petro warned that US military action would have grave consequences. Brazil under President Lula voiced serious worry, emphasizing non-intervention as a cornerstone of its foreign policy. But not every country is against Washington. Argentina's President Javier Milei, a close Trump ally, supports US claims of Venezuelan narco-terrorism. Ecuador and Paraguay have even begun labeling Venezuelan networks as terrorist organizations. The region is split, reviving Cold War-style divisions in the Western Hemisphere. Why does this matter beyond Latin America? Because Venezuela's instability threatens the global oil market. The US has already sanctioned Iran and Russia. If Venezuela is also taken offline, the world will be left with fewer oil suppliers than ever before. That could mean a spike in global oil prices, rising inflation, and even the risk of a global economic slowdown. India and China, both heavy buyers of Venezuelan oil, would be directly...
This gangsterism right here is like a drug dealer knocking off all this competition, and then you got to get the work from him. You got to buy the drugs from him. This is all this is. You heard what they said. The U.S. targeted Iran, targeted Russia. This is two of the major oil suppliers in the world. Yeah, target them, sanction them. You can't get no oil from them. You got to come to the U.S. Now they go after the next largest oil supplier, Venezuela. Make up all kind of bullshit. They already hit Libya. That was a major oil supplier. You see how this go? Gangsterism wrapped up into U.S. policies. And for Trump, Trump done lost all credibility. This clown for Trump to say the U.S. is tired of narco trafficking and they really to start a war. You just said all these wars was nonsense. You've been preaching that. He don't give a fuck about what the MAGA saying. They pissed off. Them people don't want no goddamn war. They whole cornerstone was they was tired of Obama and Bush them talking war, Biden talking war. Here go Trump saying, "Oh, we gotta fight Venezuela because they narco traffickers." And let me tell y'all this. Be ready for this. I just seen El Mayo, the head of the cartel that they arrested. I didn't see that play coming. He just pled guilty today. They say he gave him 15 billion. All that is nonsense. They took 15 billion from him. But I can guarantee you the head of the Mexican cartel, El Mayo, that locked up, and El Chapo, he gonna do this too because his sons made a deal with the government. And I seen in the article, I didn't take it serious, but now I'm taking it very serious. They're gonna say they just small potatoes. They really work for Venezuela. Be prepared for the Mexican cartels because the U.S. just made a video yesterday. Came out and said they defeated the Mexican cartels. The Mexican cartels is defeated. They're beating their chest. This is all a play. They're saying the Mexican cartels have been defeated. They shut them down. They arrested their leaders. But now they got evidence. The leaders are saying the real cartel that they got to deal with is Venezuela.
Hit, and the shockwaves would ripple worldwide. So where does this lead? The US Navy, political backing in Congress, and a justification of fighting drugs. On the other, Maduro's militias, Russian drones, Chinese financing, and strong anti-intervention voices in Latin America. This is not just a Venezuelan crisis anymore. It's a geopolitical flashpoint where American power collides with the interests of Russia and China right in the US backyard. Will the Trump administration press ahead with a military strike, or will global pushback force Washington to negotiate? Either way, Venezuela has become the new stage in a dangerous game of great power rivalry. And just like past US interventions in Iraq, Libya, and Afghanistan, what begins with promises of quick victory may end in
years. There's not no Iraq, there's not no Libya, there's not no Afghanistan. Venezuela, way powerful than all of those nations, way more powerful than all of those nations. And Iraq didn't have Russia with them. Libya didn't. Afghanistan didn't. They didn't have China down with them. None of them was serious geopolitical allies at the time of their demise to Russia and China. Venezuela is. No, that's a totally different ball game from any of those nations. That's just totally different.
Of chaos. What do you think? Is the United States preparing for a full-scale invasion of Venezuela, or deployment merely to destroy the drug cartel? Let us know in the comments.
He is the cartels. What are you talking about? And Maduro called Trump out, say he's a narco trafficker and a drug kingpin, talking shit to him. All right, let's see. Let's get to it. Oh, well, let's see it. Okay. Let's hear what the great Maduro, because Maduro's a revolutionary who always had respect for black people. Him and Chavez always. Remember, it's Maduro who sided with Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, sent them weapons, sided with them. He's not worried about this, gringos.
In Colombia, they produce cocaine. Venezuela is a territory, and this must be known in all languages, in all countries, in the South, in the Caribbean, in the North, in Europe. The experts know it, Boris, journalist. The experts from various countries know that Venezuela is a territory free of coca leaf plantations, free of cocaine production. And Venezuela is fighting and defeating the small percentage, just 5%, of Colombian cocaine that tries to pass through Venezuelan territory. Colombia has 7 U.S. military bases with personnel, equipment, and technology. And I ask myself, if they have 7 military bases in Colombia, why has cocaine produced?
Hold on, revolutionary salute to our brother at Lunch Break Chronicles for the donation to the war chest. Revolutionaries with life. Absolutely appreciate the love. Soldier salute to you. Say revolutionary salute. Revolutionary salute to you, brother.
Production tripled around all those military bases. Where does the money from the sale of that cocaine go? We're talking thousands of millions of dollars. And that cocaine enters the United States. Who buys it? And the money from those who buy and sell it in the U.S., where is it? In which banks? So, the war they want should be waged inside the United States against the U.S. mafias that control the entire...
See, this is where the U.S. messing up, and they got to kill him You see, because Nicolas Maduro could go to the United Nations with the evidence, and the United Nations Security Council is going to demand the U.S. If you're saying this is a narco trafficker, produce the evidence that he's a narco trafficker. The evidence they're going to produce, I'm telling you now, is El Mayo just signed that deal with the government, and so did El Chapo, the dirty, no good, backstabbers, snitches, them drug dealers, who's ever listen to them. They're going to say he's the boss, Maduro, in Venezuela. They just work for him. That's what they're going to say. And the U.S. going to try to present that as their evidence, because they don't got no evidence these people sell no drugs. They got the evidence the drugs coming from Mexico. But they know this man can present his case like he presenting to the world that it's the U.S. who is the narco traffickers. It's the U.S. that's in Colombia. Then cocaine went off just exploded when the U.S. military got there and the CIA got there. They got to Peru. You want some of that Peruvian flake? Yeah, the U.S. military was down there too. It's the U.S. who, while the Taliban didn't want no goddamn heroin in Afghanistan, it's the U.S. who went to Afghanistan, and then majority of the world's heroin came from Afghanistan while the U.S. was there. You see? All the U.S. going to do is have these people show the world they the real traffickers. They the real dope dealers.
A drug trafficking business in Colombia, in Central America, and beyond. It's the U.S. mafias that control it. They know it. They know it well. But they change the narrative. They no longer accuse those they want to destroy of being communists. That was their accusation during the Soviet Union era. They no longer accuse them of terrorism, the war on terror, accusing Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya of being terrorists. Now the accusation, I'd call it crude, extravagant, ridiculous, is drug trafficking. Well, I say Venezuela is...
You can't call them a terrorist because that's not going to fly. So they just label them human traffickers. And with the same military vigor, they said they got to go after the drug traffickers, as they went after ISIS and Al-Qaeda. What? What the hell are you talking about? But then they get to say, hundreds of thousands of people die daily from fentanyl, real deaths, and then blame it on whoever they're going to point it on. They say it's China. They're scared to send your warships to China. They know better. So they're trying to find the lesser of the revolutionaries, Venezuela, which is not going to be no walk in the park for the U.S. A lot of deaths, a lot of destruction. They have to do this because they have to hurt China and Russia without physically fighting China or Russia. And they have made up their mind they're going to go to war with Venezuela.
Is clean and free of drug trafficking. It is an outrage. It is treason to the homeland. Those from Venezuela or from abroad who are promoting, calling for, encouraging, applauding a military aggression against our country or the assassination of our political and military leaders are committing a serious, very serious crime, an act of treason never seen before. Because I say to you, Boris, in light of your reflection, what would happen in the United States of America? I ask everyone who sees me, who hears me through social media or the press, what would happen in the United States if a political group there, or a group of commentators from within or outside the U.S., called for another country to invade, bomb, or attempt to assassinate key U.S. officials or leaders? What would the United States do? Silence, so you can reflect. What would the United States do? What would the government do? What would the military forces do? What would U.S. courts do if an American man or woman of any social class, a public figure, a political party leader, or an opposition force called on foreign powers, I won't name one, to bring their ships, to bomb, to kill, to intervene? What would happen in the U.S.? It's a simple question. Whoever answers that question is also answering the question about Venezuela. I am sure that the people of the United States would rise to defend their land, their homeland, their peace, and their security, just like we Venezuelans are rising. We are standing on the side of the law. Venezuelans are acting within our law, and this land will not be touched by anyone. I swear to you, no one will touch this land. This land is sacred, blessed, and it is the land of the liberators. The American empire, aware of its historical decline as the dominant hegemonic power for almost a century, especially in Latin America, which is its vital space, wants to force a new hegemony, a new domination, and that is why it started the economic trade war. That is why it threatens all countries in the world with war. That is why it has such an aggressive, brutal policy of threatening powerful governments. They mess with the world's powers, with small countries. They blackmail everyone. We are at a turning point, transitioning from the old imperial world to the new world of the peoples of the South, to the new multipolar world. These are the birth pains of a new world, and Venezuela is once again at the forefront, just as it was 200 years ago.
Men and women on the entire Venezuelan side as reinforcement in addition to those we already have. No? As reinforcement over those we already have up to the border of Táchira state. Then comes peace zone number 2, and then the peace zone number 3. All this is the border with our sister Colombia. The president has ordered a special operational reinforcement of the Catatumbo lightning operation and has extended it to the state of Táchira with a peace zone number 1. And has ordered in a first phase a deployment of 15,000 men and women. 15,000 men and women on the entire Venezuelan side as reinforcement in addition to those we already have. No? As reinforcement over those we already have up to the border of Táchira state. Then comes peace zone number 2, and then the peace zone number 3. All this is the border with our sister Colombia. If 87% of the drugs leave through here, and 5% leave through this side, and 8% leave through here, why isn't there a military deployment in this area? to fight against drug trafficking. Why the hypocrisy of saying it's a fight against drug trafficking? Why don't they deploy their fleet, their planes here to fight against the 87% of the drugs that come out of Colombia? Curiously, they deploy it and are worried about where supposedly 5% comes out. Hypocrites, their arguments fall apart.
People get exposed. 87% of drugs from out Colombia picked by America. That's what he's saying. If the U.S. does try to attack Venezuela, then they will be attacking a nation which they have not had any type of battle with since maybe, well, never, because Venezuela has air defense systems that the U.S. has never, ever fought before. They only bullied on people who couldn't defend their skies, who didn't have anti-missile systems, who didn't have real vital military structures. So this will be the first time we get to see America actually have to fight a real military.
Top 6 best surface-to-air missiles in Venezuela. Hello, how are you? How are my esteemed subscribers? In this new video we are going to get to know the 6 best surface-to-air missiles that equip the CODI Integral Aerospace Defense Command of Venezuela, which is currently the...
Now, the U.S. military lost to the Taliban. I wonder what the defeat would have looked like if the Taliban had these type of weapons. I'm just using logic here. You lost to the Taliban. They didn't have tanks. They didn't have planes. They didn't have boats, and you suffered a humiliating victory. But they want us to believe they're going to go defeat the Venezuelans who have advanced weapons.
The best anti-aircraft defense system in all of Latin America and the second best anti-aircraft system in the American continent.
Okay, Venezuela, I've already said this. The most powerful military in Latin America, the strongest military in Latin America is Venezuela. They have the second best anti-aircraft system in the Americas. They're only second to who? America. Now that's very important. Why? Because they can shoot the American planes down. America likes to fly over people and bomb them. Well, guess what? You lose a lot of pilots and you lose a lot of planes and you get a bunch of humiliation fighting the Venezuelans. You have to respect the air defense systems like the Russians have to respect the Ukrainians, and it takes time. The U.S. don't have time. You lose a lot of soldiers on the ground. The U.S. don't like to lose soldiers. Come on now.
Only behind the United States anti-aircraft and anti-missile system. Well, without further ado, let's start with the top. Let's see what you think. 6.
They never gonna show this shit on U.S. media.
MBTA Mistral Portable Anti-Aircraft Missile. The Mistral is an infrared-guided surface-to-air anti-aircraft missile manufactured by the European multinational missile systems company MBDA. It is based on the French SATCP missile. It is a portable missile developed in 1974 that would later become the Mistral. The Mistral is an anti-portable system designed to counter threats from helicopters and low and very low altitude aircraft that helps defend vital points or combat units. Its tactical features include being fire and forget. The missile has a passive direct homing system with proportional navigation, whose explosive warhead contains 1,800 Stustine balls and a 3 kg exolite explosive charge. Its range is 5.2 kilometers, so it is considered a very short-range missile. The missile self-destructs 12.5 seconds after being launched. I have not found information on when Venezuela acquired this missile or how many missiles were purchased. However, the Mistral has been seen present in military parades. They are probably the Mistral 1 or Mistral 2 versions. 5. RBC-70 Portable Anti-Aircraft Missile. The RBC-70 is a portable anti-aircraft missile system or MANCH of Swedish origin, designed for combat in all types of climates and with little or no support from other forces. It entered service in 1977 and since then has been constantly updated and improved in its Mk1, Mk2 and current and modern new generation versions. Currently developed by SAF Buffers Dynamics, the system is based on the principle of ray tracking.
Afghanistan didn't have all this.
A laser beam allows it to be immune to electronic and infrared countermeasures, being the first of its kind in the world with this guidance system. Another advantage is that it is not limited to locking on to the target only by the engine output, being able to hit other critical parts of the target and engage frontal targets. The RBC-70 Mk1 has been in service with the Venezuelan Army since 1990, including the system simulator, which can recreate any air threat situation with several targets. Several batches of missiles and accessories of the Mk2 version were subsequently acquired. Since 1998, it has been supported by Giroff's 75 radars as an early warning element at firing points. These missiles have a maximum range of 6,000 meters and a maximum altitude range of 3,000 meters. 4. 9K338 IGLA-S Portable Anti-Aircraft Missile. The 9K38 IGLA-S is a Soviet-made surface-to-air missile. Portable and infrared guided, it entered service with the Red Army on March 11, 1981. Proof of its efficiency is that on January 17, 1991, a decade after its entry into service during the Gulf War, one of these missiles shot down a Panagiota tornado bomber of the Royal Air Force that was bombing Iraq. The missile has undergone several versions and improvements since its introduction into active service, including an increased range of up to 7 kilometers and an altitude range of up to 3,500 meters, resistance to flares and electronic countermeasures, which sets it apart from other missiles of this type. A more sensitive seeker, increasing its ability to lock on to low-flying aircraft. This improved missile is known as the 9K338 and the S. According to recently revealed information, Venezuela has 5,000 IGLA-S missiles in service. Although according to other sources, Venezuela only purchased 2,000 missiles of this type in 2008. 3.
Nobody, so they got all their stockpile.
Medium-range anti-aircraft missile S-125 Pechora M2.
Very dangerous.
The S-125 Pechora is a surface-to-air missile system of Russian origin. It is capable of attacking lower-flying targets than previous systems and, as a more modern system, it is much more resistant to electronic countermeasures. It reaches a pursuit speed of around Mach 3. Both stages are powered by solid-fuel rocket motors. The S-125 uses radio-controlled guidance. The S-125 is launched from launch pads that are normally fixed, but can be relocated. The radars used by the system are the P-15 flat face, which is a UHF acquisition radar with parabolic antennas and has a range of around 250 kilometers.
I mean, what are we talking about here? The U.S. have not fought a real military since World War II, or since the Vietnam War, and that was a big loss for them. What the hell are we talking about? See, they're on the news, U.S. sends warships. That's one side of the fucking story. Tell the other side of the story. They're not going to tell the Americans because people got loved ones in the U.S. military on those damn warships. They want them to think you're going to beat up on some narco traffickers and you're going to face a real fucking military who all their life they've been preparing for one war. That's this war.
And the low-blow radar, which is a target tracking and missile guidance radar, which has a range of around 85 kilometers. The S-125's batteries can also be fitted with the P-12 SPA-R early warning radar with a range of around 270 kilometers. The missile's warhead has an explosive of 60 kilograms, so if an enemy aircraft is hit by this missile, it is very unlikely that it will survive. The S-125 reaches a speed of 750 meters per second and its maximum range is about 25 to 35 kilometers and its confirmed flight ceiling is between 300 and 15,000 meters. The Pechora M2 anti-aircraft systems, an improved version of the original Pechora, are now equipped with more powerful and effective missiles. Venezuela acquired the S-125 anti-aircraft system together with the Buck and S-300 missiles in the early 2000s. 2. Medium-range anti-aircraft missile, Buck M2E. The Buck missile system is an anti-aircraft system armed with surface-to-air missiles developed by the Soviet Union and later by Russia. It was designed to disrupt cruise missiles, smart bombs and manned or unmanned aircraft. Over the years it has been updated and improved several times as the Buck M2 version known in the West as SAW-17 or Grizzly. The Buck M2 extends its range to 42 kilometers and 25 kilometers in height. The system was semi-active. It can track up to 24 targets simultaneously. The anti-aircraft system consists of 3 parts, including independent vehicles, a command center, a missile launcher, and an acquisition and tracking radar. The Buck M2 has a combat effectiveness of between 90 and 95%. This missile has been in service in Venezuela since 2013. 1. Long-range anti-aircraft missile, S-300VM Ante-2000.
Come on, man. Stop playing, bro. Stop playing. Stop it. Just turn around and go home right now. We can end this humiliation. We already then got us humiliated Trump by acting like you finna go to war with Venezuela. You know, you don't want to get your ass kicked by Venezuela, and then people saying, well, why was you ever talking shit to Russia? What was you doing talking shit to China and their little brother? But you can't talk shit to the big brother if the little brother beat you up. This is their little brother, and they beat you up. The almighty S-300 system. Delhi. You won't be flying over Venezuela bombing shit if they got the S-300. That's not going to happen. We're seeing that Ukraine. Ukrainians have S-300 systems from the Soviet days, and Russia has to be very weary of them. They can only be in certain locations. That's why they have to use standoff missile systems. They just can't fly all over Ukraine. Why? Because the S-300 will shoot their planes down. The U.S. don't want the world to know Venezuela has these. They don't want the Americans to know Venezuela has these, but they have them.
1,500. The S-300VM Ante-2500 is a Russian anti-ballistic missile system. The system is designed to defeat ballistic missiles, short and medium-range missiles, aerostatic and cruise missiles, fixed-wing aircraft, as well as airborne early warning radar platforms and precision-guided munitions, as well as aerodynamic targets with a range of up to 200 kilometers and at an altitude of up to 30 kilometers. The anti-aircraft missile system features the degree of automation of combat performance thanks to high-speed digital computers, passive electronically scanned array radars scanned with advanced data processing methods. The S-300VM system has a combat effectiveness of 98% against fixed-wing aircraft or ballistic missiles, depending on weather conditions.
98%.
This modern system is in service in Venezuela, which is the only Latin American country with medium and long-range anti-aircraft defenses. Missiles would have arrived in Venezuela in 2011, and these are, in my personal opinion,
U.S. ain't never in their life even fought nobody with no air defense systems. That's the truth. They haven't even never in their life even fought no country with no air defense systems like the Venezuelans got. This will be the first time, you know. We're gonna see if Trump just talking his ass off or he really want war. Because the Venezuelans not backing down. You're not finna steal their oil. They're not finna stop backing Russia and China. They're not gonna stop being an ally to BRICS. It's just gonna be war.
Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today's topic has stirred serious discussions among defense experts, military analysts, and global policymakers. Russia has reportedly deployed its advanced Oreshnik hypersonic missile systems to Venezuela.
And I believe they did send the Oreshnik missile system because Putin said he would. Putin has been warning he would do just that when Biden was in office, but nobody knew what missile system he was talking to. Now they know it's the Oreshnik, and he warned them if they kept doing what they was doing in Ukraine, he would supply his friends and allies with advanced missile system. And the Oreshnik missile system, you can't stop it. There's nothing you can do with it. It's hypersonic. If the Venezuelans got it, hit anywhere in America, there's nothing America can do. Just as destructive as a nuclear weapon, but it's not nuclear, just as devastating. And there's no air defense systems in America. So if Venezuela point that missile, they're going to hit any fucking thing they choose to in America. That's a fact.
A move that is being interpreted as a significant escalation in global strategic posturing. This development marks one of the most provocative military shifts in recent years and has raised critical questions about global security, deterrence strategy, and the stability of power structures in the Western Hemisphere. The Oreshnik missile, previously seen as a cornerstone of Russia's advanced strike capability, has now entered a region that puts the southern United States directly within its range.
Then when Trump talking about he was sending nuclear submarines to the Russian coastline, he was playing right into Putin's trap. All that threatening, all that sending advanced weapons to Ukraine on Russia's border, and they played themselves. Now they're falling into a bigger trap. I'm telling everybody, Putin and China absolutely want America to go to war with Venezuela. They're going to help Venezuela stay in this fight. They're going to help Venezuela, but they're going to give the U.S. a bloody nose, big time humiliating embarrassment, and the U.S. going to have done it to themselves.
This isn't just about missiles. It's about geopolitics, technological dominance, and strategic deterrence in a world already on edge. The Oreshnik hypersonic missile is a product of years of secretive research and development, a weapon born out of Russia's ambition to bypass and neutralize the technological edge of the West. Externally, the missile appears sleek, menacing, and incredibly efficient. Its aerodynamic shape is engineered specifically for high-speed travel through the atmosphere. The missile features a sharply tapered nose cone and a narrow fuselage, constructed with composite materials designed to withstand the extreme heat generated during hypersonic flight. At speeds exceeding Mach 8, surface temperatures can soar above 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit, so the missile's skin incorporates heat, dissipating tiles and height, temperature-resistant alloys. The body of the missile is streamlined to reduce drag, and its stabilizing fins are precision, shaped for high-altitude maneuverability. Radar, absorbent coatings help the missile maintain a low observable profile, making it incredibly hard to detect during mid-course flight. When mounted on its mobile transporter, Director Launcher, or TEL, the missile is concealed under a camouflaged canopy. These TL are rugged, highly mobile platforms capable of rapid deployment and withdrawal across a variety of terrains, from dense forests to mountainous zones. Their mobility not only complicates detection by satellite surveillance, but also allows them to relocate frequently, making them difficult to target with preemptive strikes. Inside the missile, the design reflects a focus on precision, survivability, and mission flexibility. The internal guidance system is a combination of inertial navigation and satellite updates from Russia's GLONASS system, ensuring the missile maintains accuracy even in GPS-denied environments. The payload bay is modular and can accommodate both nuclear and conventional warheads depending on mission objectives. The warhead sits atop a dual-mode propulsion system. The first stage consists of a solid fuel booster that propels the missile to hypersonic speeds before the scramjet engine takes over. The scramjet allows the missile to maintain sustained hypersonic cruise speeds while executing in-flight course adjustments. Electronics on board are hardened against electromagnetic pulses and jamming, ensuring that even in a contested environment, the missile can complete its trajectory. There are embedded thermal regulators and coolant systems to maintain operational temperatures for both electronics and propulsion systems during extreme conditions. In terms of performance, the Orshnik is one of the most formidable weapons in existence. Capable of reaching speeds beyond Mach 8, it reduces the time between launch and impact to mere minutes. At these speeds, no current missile defense system in the world, including the United States Aegis, THAAD, or Patriot systems, can reliably intercept it. Furthermore, the missile doesn't follow a traditional ballistic arc. Instead, it uses a maneuverable glide path, allowing it to change altitude and direction mid-flight. This makes it unpredictable, allowing it to evade interception and confuse radar tracking systems. The operational range of the Orshnik is estimated at over 2,000 kilometers, although some sources suggest it could be extended depending on payload and flight profile. If launched from Venezuela, the missile could potentially reach targets in Florida, Georgia, Texas, and other southern U.S. states within minutes. This introduces a near-peer level threat that dramatically shifts the defensive calculus for Washington and its allies in the region. The payload capability ranges from high-explosive conventional warheads designed for pinpoint strikes on infrastructure to high-yield nuclear warheads capable of mass destruction. This dual-use capability adds to the missile's strategic ambiguity. Any launch could be interpreted as a full-scale strategic threat. Safety mechanisms in the Orshnik are designed with both operational integrity and control in mind. The warhead arming sequence requires multiple encrypted signals from both ground command and the missile's onboard system, reducing the chance of accidental or unauthorized detonation. In the event of a navigation failure or course deviation, the missile is programmed to self-destruct before reaching unintended areas. The launch system includes environmental sensors that monitor wind speed, temperature, and trajectory alignment before firing, ensuring optimal conditions for successful deployment. The TL platform also features radiation shielding and explosion dampers to protect crew members during transport and launch, especially in nuclear payload configurations. Safety also extends to launch protocols, which are believed to be under dual control, requiring both Russian military authorization and remote access codes from command centers in Moscow, further reducing the risk of rogue or accidental launches from foreign soil. The Orshnik is not just powerful, it's uniquely disruptive. One of its most critical selling points is its hypersonic glide capability, which puts it in a category few other nations have mastered. Unlike traditional intercontinental ballistic missiles that follow predictable trajectories, the Orshnik can shift paths mid-flight, weaving around radar detection zones and striking from unexpected angles. Another unique advantage is its strategic flexibility. It can be deployed from land, sea, or even airborne platforms in theory, though current models are launched from TL. The TL itself is a game changer. Rather than relying on fixed silos which are vulnerable to preemptive strikes, the mobile launch system allows Russia to hide the missile in plain sight, move it as needed, and launch it from unexpected positions. Venezuela, with its dense jungles and mountainous terrain, provides ideal cover for such systems. The psychological impact of this weapon also cannot be ignored. Its presence in the Western Hemisphere serves not only as a military threat, but also as a diplomatic tool. It forces adversaries to reconsider engagement strategies, raises questions about regional defense sufficiency, and sows uncertainty among U.S. allies in the Americas. The exact cost of the Orshnik program is difficult to estimate due to its classified nature, but industry analysts believe each missile may cost between $50 and $80 million, depending on configuration. The TL platform and command systems, along with associated support infrastructure, drive the total per unit cost much higher, A single operational battery, including several missiles, launchers, radar units, and command vehicles, could approach or exceed $500 million. For a country like Venezuela, which is under significant economic strain and international sanctions, this suggests the deployment is not a commercial purchase. Instead, it likely reflects a deeper strategic agreement with Russia, possibly involving joint operation or outright Russian control of the system on Venezuelan soil. This arrangement increases the political leverage Russia has in Latin America, while providing Venezuela with a deterrent tool that significantly alters its regional standing. The implications of this deployment are profound. For the United States, it introduces a new layer of threat that shifts the traditional balance of deterrence. With hypersonic missiles potentially minutes away from key infrastructure, leadership centers, and military bases, the margin for response shrinks dramatically. It could force a costly rethinking of homeland defense strategies, including the development of new early warning and interception systems. For Russia, the deployment is a demonstration of strategic reach. It sends a message to NATO and the West that any pressure on Russian borders can be answered with symmetrical threats near U.S. territory. It also serves as a testbed for future global deployments of hypersonic systems. For Venezuela, this bolsters its strategic relevance and adds a layer of protection against potential intervention, whether military or political. While critics argue that the move is more about psychological warfare than actual intent to use the weapons, the mere presence of Orshnik in Latin America changes everything. It shows that hypersonic warfare is no longer confined to Europe or the Pacific. It's now a global reality. This development underscores how modern conflict is no longer bound by geography. With mobile, near-undetectable weapons like the Orshnik, nations can project power far beyond their borders and hold even the most secure adversaries at risk. It also illustrates how alliances and deployments are reshaping to adapt to this new reality. The Cold War-style chessboard is evolving into a faster, more complex game where speed, stealth, and precision rule the battlefield. In conclusion, the Orshnik hypersonic missile is more than just a technological marvel. It's a symbol of the new era of strategic deterrence. Its deployment in Venezuela represents not only a military upgrade, but also a bold geopolitical maneuver that challenges existing security doctrines. It brings hypersonic warfare to the doorstep of the United States and forces the world to confront the reality that future conflicts could unfold at blistering speeds with little to no warning. Whether this leads to an arms race, strategic stalemate, or new diplomatic solutions remains uncertain. But one thing is clear: the game has changed.
Is it because the Russians fought the Great Patriotic War and the number of people that they lost? So it's grounded in their experience. And
sure. There's also the fact that they've come out the other side of an ideology that also, preached that needed to be spread to the rest of the world. They've been disillusioned of those ideological. In different terms, China has moved beyond the ideological constraints of a communist system whose tatters they still, clothe themselves in, even if in reality it's not there, right? China is only it only has the tatters of a communist state. It is not. It is a realist based nationalist Chinese state, that is more than anything, at the end of the day, if we have to talk in moral terms, driven by ancient Chinese civilizational Confucian values, because it's written into their DNA. And to a certain extent, it always was.
Yeah, that is not the way we experience the world. I mean, I can tell you I live here, right? Even the way that the media reports it, they report it in the context of with freedom and justice, Superman being our icon, right? We may have excesses, but those excesses don't besmirch us morally. What we do is morally correct. And we're the good guys. That is the way we talk about it. That's the way it's discussed. That's the way it's reflected back to us, even though we do horrible things. So it's like a country can say
for good purpose. At the end of the day, it's for the greater good.
That's what they say. But when you get Madeleine Albright on TV and they point out, hey, you guys have basically killed 500,000 babies. Is that okay? And she says, yeah, I think it's for the best.
Without hesitation, before or after that statement.
That's astonishing.
Right? That was an illusion-shattering moment of the nature of this beast. Yes.
But it wasn't, which is my point.
Oh, it was for us. It wasn't for them. It was for us. It was for you. It was for me. It was for most of the people out there watching this, right? Who know what we're talking about. But that moment was, yes, the mask, the creature under the mask was revealed.
Yeah, that was an astonishing moment. I put it that way. That was an astonishing moment. That was very honest of her. Without any consequences for doing so, and consequences for saying that. And I guess that's the thing that terrifies me. I think you're right. I think it's kind of the Hitlerian ideology, right? Where it's the triumph of the will. Yeah, we don't have the material resources in order to do this, but we'll figure it out. And you get
there was a statement in the first George Bush administration that was attributed to Karl Rove about the nature of reality. We're an empire now, and when we act, we create our own reality. And while you're studying that reality judiciously, as you will, we'll act again, creating other new realities, which you can study too. And that's how things will sort out. We're history's actors, destiny. And all of you will be left to just study what we do. That's where they're playing from.
Yeah, but that doesn't work in practice. I always say reality asserts itself. It's kind of like when this war started. And I would say, Ukraine is losing. This looks bad. And the Western media would be like, Kursk was fantastic. But shows Zelensky still has it in him. And I would point out, reality would assert itself. It always does. It doesn't care about your beliefs. Doesn't care about.
It doesn't, though. While the dollar is the U.S. global reserve currency, that reality does not assert itself. Right?
For now.
The U.S., at the end of the day, has not lost much in this conflict. Yes, their Pentagon stockpiles are down precarious low, particularly in air defense missiles, but that's actually the result of several different conflicts. But they have not paid a price. Even Europeans have only seen, shall we say, a marginal lowering of their standard of living. They have not suffered in this conflict yet. And until they do suffer, reality will not assert itself, because it has not been brought home to them, right? To remember the way that the New York Times spoke of Ukraine flying drones into Russian business skyscrapers in Moscow City, right, 2 years ago. They spoke of it in approving terms as Ukrainian, despite the fact that these were obviously not in any way stretch of the imagination military targets, because it was Ukraine bringing the war home to Russians. Well, until the war is brought home to Americans and Europeans, that reality will and has not and will not reassert itself.
But if you're right,
by then it will probably be too late, because then we'll be in the nuclear game.
It's that part. That's what I'm saying. If you're right, it will assert itself.
Yep.
Meaning there will be.
It'll be too late though. At that point, it'll be too late.
I'm just saying it will. I'm not saying about where time frame. I'm just saying it will. I mean, at some point they will be disabused of this idea of Western supremacy and all this other nonsense.
I'm sure you've read the reports that they now intend to put intermediate range strategic capable missiles in Europe, right? Germany intends to buy, right? The Typhon system that will allow nuclear tipped tomahawks to be launched deep into Russia from German territory. And Russia, according to some reports, unconfirmed, that one of the reasons why the U.S. is now getting so excited about Venezuela is that Russia is planning on countering that by putting Oreshniks in Venezuela. Now, I can't confirm. But I mean, I'm sure you see we're in a Cuban Missile Crisis, playover there, right?
But you need that. Look, I know people are going to say, "Whoa, what do you mean?" You need that. You need leverage. Like, there's no way. The U.S. believes it's untouchable. There's a line in what is his name? The Three-Body Problem book, where one of the scientists points out, he says, I always believe that there will be somebody at the table that's untouched. He said, I got that wrong. Everybody's going to be touched by this. The U.S. believes it's untouchable. They believe, as you pointed out, with this division of labor, that they can feed the Europeans to the Russians. That's what they believe. In our DNA, we believe it. We believe that Europe is just Ukraine in expanse. What happens when that's not true? Now, I guess the terrifying part of this is you ended up with somebody like Donald Trump at the helm as opposed to JFK. But otherwise, how do you gain leverage? How do you make it clear you will be touched?
Why is that terrifying? Because if Trump was JFK, he really would be dead now.
Mark, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Having somebody with competence as opposed to somebody without is a very big deal. Those things are different. JFK, who made the speech, said we need to understand the Russians. We need to understand where they're coming from. We need to understand that 80% of the Nazis
killed him for it. And they
killed him for it, but he did it, is my point. He was competent in a way that we haven't had a competent leader in a very long time. These people are ideologues, as you point out. That's a terrifying reality that we're stuck with. What am I getting wrong? What am I getting wrong?
You're not. I'm simply pointing out that if there was such a person, they would kill him, right? Because it's the institutions, right? It's this whole. It's not just one person. It's not one secret cabal of transnational or Jewish, leaders pulling the puppet strings. It's not the Illuminati. It's not the Bilderberg group. It is something much harder and at the same time more prosaic and harder to understand. It is institutions where entire classes of people are ingrained with certain beliefs and worldviews. And that is the belief system, that exceptionalism, right? That foreign policy aspects of that exceptionalism that is DNA coded into the blob, into the US foreign policy and security. You can say the elite, but really it's the entire establishment, right?
Yeah.
From root to branch. And it's just, You can't uproot that. You can't. I mean, the only thing that can uproot that is things like, a decades-long occupation of Japan and Germany, right? I mean, that is, that type of military defeat and subjugation, right? Or maybe Great Depression style mass economic suffering and deprivation across a country that could lead to serious political changes. It is only, these type of shocks, right? If we're talking in, Naomi Klein's terms of the shock doctrine, it is only at those times that radical changes of the institutional political situation become possible.
Are we currently in the beginning of World War III?
Oh, yeah. We probably have been since 2008.
Why 2008?
Because that's the August War. That's the war. That's the Georgia War, right? Because what happened in Georgia was just a rehearsal, right, for what's happening here, right? Because NATO said we're going to bring Georgia and Ukraine into NATO, right? Putin warned in his 2007 Munich speech, famous, don't do this, don't go down that road. In 2008, they did. They had their neoliberal strongman coming to power in Georgia on the color revolution, on the Rose Revolution, and they went for broke, and Russia stopped them cold in Georgia. And Georgia was a much smaller country, and it was over in a matter of days. And they didn't have the ability, they didn't share a European border with Georgia that they could flood the country with weapons and money and everything. It was just too far from their geopolitical hold in the South Caucasus at the time. So, but that is when it started, right? Everything. Then we had the war in Syria. We had the war in Libya. And now we have, since 2014, the replay, the Orange Revolution didn't rewrite the Ukrainian DNA. So they needed the Maidan to make sure that the results of their geopolitical flipping of Ukraine weren't just reversed, right? They had to lustrate and pogrom and ban all of the political opposition, meaning all of the political voice of East Ukraine, needed to be excised so that in the next election, it just wouldn't have been reversed again as it was after the Orange Revolution, right? They needed to hardwire that into the new, anti-Russian, pro-Western Ukraine. They had to make sure that there couldn't be a political revisiting of the Maidan Putsch. And they did. And Russia stood by, hoping that there would be a political settlement with the West, the Minsk agreements, and he has since admitted that was my biggest mistake.
I'm curious on something. When the last defensive line falls, Slavyansk, Kramatorsk, and whatever line they come up with that is going to fall apart pretty quickly, I don't think they even have the time to do it, frankly. But okay, whatever that line is, what happens?
Then they simply continue. They will already prepare to set up a proxy government, a shadow government first, maybe in Lvov. If not in Lvov, then in Poland or Brussels or New York or, what's it? Nova, Northern Virginia, yeah, right, somewhere there they will set it up, right? And we know all of this because before Russia even intervened, as the New York Times and the Washington Post reported, they were training Ukrainian special forces for a guerrilla war, right? They were preparing for what comes after this before this started.
I guess what I'm getting at is the Russian military just keeps going. Because governments in exile don't matter in real terms. I mean, that's not like facts on the ground issues. I guess what I'm getting at is that last defensive line falls. The Russian military pours into the rest of Ukraine. Ukraine doesn't have a defensive line to stop him.
Okay.
So
I'm not so sure the analogy of water pouring in is correct, because again, it's in military terms, sure, right? But remember that occupying Ukraine is a very big country. Yeah. And to physically occupy all of Ukraine, every town, settlement, and so forth, Russia has enough troops on hand, right? The current system is enough to take the Donbass and probably everything up to the Dnieper River. Probably. But if you're thinking Odessa and Kiev and, God forbid, West Ukraine beyond that, then that is not going to be enough. Russia's going to have to call up its reservists, right? It's got a pool of 2 million reservists, right, that it can call on. It won't have to go to the civilian population until the final war really starts with Europe. But that will still have all kinds of political and economic costs. And Russia won't want to do it. The Kremlin doesn't want to do it. The Kremlin desperately hopes that they can force a political settlement on the West, that they will cut their losses, and they will not do it. They will not accept it. It's not going to happen. They'll force Russia to choke itself on all of Ukraine, to overextend itself, right? It's baked into the papers. You know, you've read them, Rand Corporation as well. There's the inevitable geopolitical, the strategic logic of this has been worked out a decade in advance, right? I don't know if you've read or watched The Foundation, yes. Right? Yeah, it's like psychohistory. You can see the possible pathways, right? It's not quite that power of prognostication on that level, but all of this has been planned out before, and we're just playing through a script now.
What happens to Zelensky? I always say he's a man with no future.
Who cares? Who cares?
Actor played his role. He can leave the stage.
Yep.
Does he know he's playing a role?
I mean, what happened to Juan Guaido? What happened to him?
Who's that?
Yeah, who's that? When's the last time you heard from Svetlana Tikhanovskaya? Or, for that matter, what happened to Bashar al-Assad?
All of these people, or let's say all of these articles in the West are talking about Zelensky taking over, saying that they want a political change. Zelensky is their guy. Now, I got to be honest with you. I don't know the difference between the two. Short of...
I do.
What's the difference?
The difference is that Zelensky is a committed ideological Banderite. And
you don't think Zelensky is?
I think he wasn't, like Poroshenko. He was someone else who then was forced to internalize, right, the ideological and far right underpinnings of the regime that he inherited, right? He has since internalized it, but he wasn't that way when he began. I mean, there's plenty of videos out there of him talking about how ridiculous the Banderites were, how East Ukrainians should be able to speak Russian, how Russians and Ukrainians could never go to war because we're the same people, right? He said all of that at one point, and then obviously, he internalized all of this because he became the head of the institutions, right? And he was forced to do so at some level. And now I just think he's mad. I mean, I don't think, his own people have told Time Magazine they think he's delusional, right? That he's the emperor with no clothes. I think at this point he's been broken by ideologically, mentally, emotionally. He's broken. So that's why I say it really doesn't matter. But Zelensky, no, man, that guy had 2 busts of Stepan Bandera in his military office. Not just one, two, because one bust of Stepan Bandera is not enough. Another of Roman Shukovich, and the big black, red and black Banderite banner spread across the whole back wall of his military office. Don't tell me things will be any better or there'll be any diplomatic settlement with that guy at the helm. Right?
Well,
He is chilling in veritable political exile from Zelensky, at least in London, commenting how Russia can be defeated with an army of robots. I mean, that is, high tech. That is where, he's not talking peace. He's not talking hard concessions. No, he's talking the army of robots and underground boring machines that will defeat Russia, right?
One of the Azov members did an interview, and he pointed out, he says, look, even if we had 100,000 men, it wouldn't make a difference. There was another interview that took place, I think it was in the Times magazine, where the guy was like, the Russians are trying to kill me. And he says, Zelensky knows that if he makes any deal or any concessions, it will be a betrayal, and they will string him up in a heartbeat.
They've said that repeatedly from the beginning. It's been said openly online. There's not really. I mean, the Western media can choose not to acknowledge that, because to acknowledge that would be acknowledging, the reality of who they've been backing in all of this. So they can never admit that. But yeah, it's been said plenty of times by enough of these top right-wing commanders.
It's can't get his name out. If Zaluzny, Valery, and Zelensky are effectively similar at this
Valery,
thank you. Zaluzny. If they're so similar at this point in the way that they've internalized all of this, then what's the point of the change? Is it just the new person at the helm? Is it just to try to? They know Ukraine is against the war. At this point, you got like 69, 70% saying we want it to stop, even if you have to give up land. And so,
sometimes you just want to remake the same movie with a different person who's almost certainly going to be worse than the original, right? There's an impulse to that, right?
Yeah.
That's why you continually have in domestic politics, you have this idea of a government reshuffle to put a few new faces in there, right, that are in charge of the same institutions, and 2 years down the line you'll see that absolutely nothing has changed, but it provides for a degree of political PR reset.
Mark, I see the logic of your point of view. I hope you're wrong.
So do I.
I hope
so do I.
A corner that we turn. I hope there's a magical door. I don't see it right now, because I agree with you.
I've got a magical a magical wardrobe back there, and if I open it up and I go past the fur coats, I'll find myself in Narnia, right? I read that book as a kid too.
Life is weird. Sometimes there are corners we don't see, and hopefully there's a corner. I don't see it right now. I mean, I got to be honest, I don't see a corner for a lot of things. I think the U.S. is going to collapse at some point. I don't think you can run in contradictions forever and expect good outcomes.
I sincerely hope you're right there, that the U.S. collapses at some point too, because that will be the only way, favorable to me that's out of this.
Yeah. Mark?
Sorry for you, but I'm out of it.
Yeah, sucks for me, right? But we create chaos. It's just an agent of chaos. And you can look at any war around the globe, and there's a U.S. element or contingent egging it like an enzyme, egging it along. And there's this good question of, okay, would these countries or would these places act this way if the U.S. wasn't involved? Look at Syria. Syria is a great example. I mean, they're trying to create political chaos in Lebanon while egging on Wahhabis and Israelis to effectively attack Lebanon.
If they could get firm control of the entire state, they would. But yes, chaos is an acceptable plan B, because they're perfectly positioned to exploit it. Yeah, they're okay with that as a plan B.
I'm saying that's all around the world.
Yes,
it's all around the world. Mark, you are fantastic. Thank you for this. Mark Sloboda, International
Iranian-made unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs, are stationed in Venezuela, on the northeast tip of South America, where some 2,000 kilometers, 1,243 miles, separate them from skyscrapers in Miami. The author of a new report on the threat of UAVs has told JNS, head of the research department at the Alma Center, a defense watchdog located in northern Israel, said the new report highlighted a topic that until now has received little attention: the arrival of Iranian-made UAVs in the Western Hemisphere. The report notes that in general, Iranian-made UAVs compose thousands of unmanned systems, which are designed to gather intelligence and to strike surface or air targets, either by launching missiles and bombs or conducting a suicide explosive attack by diving into the target. Venezuela, essentially in the backyard of the US, is a state that the office of Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei classifies as being, at least symbolically, a part of the radical Shiite axis, said Biri, a former member of the IDF Military Intelligence Directorate. The Venezuelan regime, like Iran, is isolated. They share common interests and foster ties. Iran has clear economic and military interests in the country, and it is exploiting Venezuela's weakness, said Biri. Venezuela, for its part, benefits by receiving military capabilities in the form of UAVs from Iran, which it says are for domestic security use, such as protecting oil assets. Venezuela also swaps its heavy oil for Iranian condensate oil, which can be used to make gasoline, and which Venezuela can use to improve the quality of its tar-like crude oil, according to a Reuters report. The US has been concerned over Iranian oil tankers and naval vessels traveling to Venezuela in recent months. In 2020, Khamenei's office published an image showing Jerusalem's Al-Aqsa Mosque surrounded by Iranian figures and Iranian proxy leaders. The image remarkably included Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro. Ultimately, the Iranians have marked out Venezuela as a potential base for some sort of activity against the US in the future, Biri told JNS. Even if they do not actually act from it, in Iran's strategic view, merely having a presence there is a threat to the US, he added. The Islamic Republic appears to believe that such a presence could contribute to its deterrence posture against Washington, helping it to think twice before taking military action against Iran. Iran has unveiled multiple UAVs in recent years with ranges of 2,000 kilometers. Asked if it was reasonable to assume that Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps maintains personnel in Venezuela, Biri replied in the affirmative, adding that they could be there under the designation of being military or technological advisors. We know that a production line for making the Iranian Mohajer 6 UAV has been set up in Venezuela, ostensibly for domestic use, said Biri. The Alma Center's report estimated that closer to home, Hezbollah in Lebanon has amassed around 2,000 UAVs, a dramatic leap from the approximate 50 that it had in 2006. The number of UAVs in Hezbollah's possession has gone up threefold every few years. At some point, it will hit a ceiling, but they haven't reached that yet, Biri said. In the end, Hezbollah wants an extensive UAV capability, made up of large systems, because of its understanding of the damage this can cause Israel. That potential damage would be both actual and cognitive among the public, with the UAVs making up for many other capabilities that Hezbollah lacks, namely, air power and sufficient quantities of precision missiles. It has been estimated that Hezbollah have a few hundred PGMs, but they think that isn't enough. Hezbollah has run into difficulties in its attempt to obtain more. Suddenly, it has an alternative. UAVs are relatively cheap and accurate. They bridge the gap. Hence, they're interested in growing their stockpile, Biri explained. During the Syrian war and Hezbollah's heavily involvement in it, the Iranian Shiite axis was able to open a ground smuggling corridor linking Iran to Syria via Iraq. This, Biri said, allowed for the smuggling of UAVs to Hezbollah's possession. The cherry on top is the growth in the domestic UAV manufacturing capability by Hezbollah in Lebanon, he said. It can create its own UAVs on Lebanese territories by purchasing local components. While the majority of their UAV fleet is smuggled from Iran, a growing number of the systems are self-produced in Lebanon, using Iranian know-how. While UAVs began as tactical threats, a swarm of such systems that targets Israeli air defense systems quickly becomes a strategic threat, according to Biri. They can be sent towards Haifa port on swarm attacks, paralyzing it, or to Ben Gurion airport. This creates a strategic problem, he said.
Three days ago, retired U.S. Army Colonel and former Chief of Staff to the United States Secretary of State, Lawrence Wilkerson, made a statement that shocked the West in Ukraine. In particular, answering American journalists' questions, he bluntly stated that Moscow would never agree to a truce in the Ukrainian conflict, since the Russian army is advancing quite successfully in all key directions of the front. According to him, in such a situation, it is simply not beneficial for Russia to conclude a peace treaty with Ukraine, since the current realities on the battlefield indicate that Moscow can take control not only of the entire Donbass, but also of other territories. I'm sure that Russia will not make peace with Ukraine. I'm sure there will be no ceasefire. Russia has already won this war. Do you think the side that confidently wins on the battlefield needs to conclude a truce? It's crazy. The Russians have already won. On the one hand, we have Napoleon, who has already won. On the other hand, we have a defeated side that will be completely destroyed if the collective West does not stop this madness soon, Lawrence Wilkerson said. Furthermore, Lawrence Wilkinson also criticized experts, who claim that the current conflict in Ukraine is similar to the events of the 1950-1953 Korean War. According to him, during the Korean War, the opposing sides advanced very slowly. And at the same time, none of the parties had the initiative on the battlefield. It was this fact that allowed the warring parties to talk about negotiations and a truce. As for the fighting in Ukraine, the situation in this country is radically different from the events in Korea. The fact is that the Russian army completely owns the initiative on the battlefield and moves forward along the entire combat contact line. Under such circumstances, discussing negotiations and a truce is fundamentally irrational from a military perspective. Thus, it becomes clear that Moscow will seek the capitulation of the Kiev regime with the help of military force, and that Russia will continue to achieve all its goals in the special military operation zone, solely with the help of its army. By the way, even Western think tanks acknowledge that the supremacy of the Russian army is evidenced by the elevated rate of destruction of Western military equipment supplied to Ukrainian troops by NATO countries. For example, starting in February 2022, the Russian army destroyed 65 units of the American HIMARS multiple launch rocket systems, along with combat crews, consisting of active duty soldiers and officers from the armies of NATO member states. In addition, the Russian army's successes on the battlefield are also related to heavy losses of Ukrainian troops in manpower. Let me remind you that a few days ago, Russian hackers managed to gain access to classified documents of the Ukrainian Defense Ministry. As a result, the whole world has learned that in 3 years of fighting, the Ukrainian army has lost 1,700,000 soldiers. These figures are really shocking, especially considering the fact that the head of the Kiev regime and his European masters are not going to admit defeat. Moreover, these warmongers claim that Ukraine will continue to fight even despite the obvious successes of Russian troops on the battlefield. For example, during an official visit to Kiev, NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte accidentally let it slip that the West is seeking a truce from Russia so that NATO countries could fully rebuild the battered Ukrainian army and prepare it for a new round of confrontation against Moscow. Mark Rutte claims that at the moment, the West is working on creating a two-tier system, where the top priority will be to strengthen the defense capability of the Ukrainian army, so that Kiev can withstand any challenges. At the same time, he noted that to solve this, the West must get a temporary ceasefire from Russia, or conclude a peace agreement. Thus, this warmonger essentially set out his stall, and recognized that the West needs a ceasefire to save and rebuild the Ukrainian army, so that Kiev could continue to resist Russia. My dear truth seekers, all this reminded me of the so-called Minsk agreements, when the West obtained a ceasefire from Russia, but at the same time, NATO countries continue to strengthen the Ukrainian army by supplying weapons systems and heavy equipment to Kiev in order to launch military operations against Donbass and Moscow. In this regard, I am sure that Russia will not make such mistakes again, and will not allow the West to deceive itself again. By the way, the fact that Vladimir Putin visited the Russian Federal Nuclear Center in Saratov on August 23 indicates that Moscow is preparing a tough response to the West if NATO countries continue to escalate the current conflict. For instance, reputable journalist Andrei Kolesnikov noticed that after arriving in Saratov, Vladimir Putin left for an unknown destination and was absent for more than 2 hours. In this regard, Andrei Kolesnikov, citing his sources in the Russian president's entourage, said that Vladimir Putin visited a classified enterprise, where he discussed the tests of the intercontinental nuclear-powered cruise missile Burevestnik. It is worth noting that this information was also disseminated by Russian TG channels, working in the interests of the Russian Defense Ministry. In particular, they said that Vladimir Putin discussed with Russian generals and engineers not only the tests of the Burevestnik, but also the prospect of adopting this missile as early as 2025. At the same time, reports indicate that Putin was pleased with the latest flight tests of the Burevestnik and ordered to do everything to ensure that this unique missile, capable of being in the air unlimited time, would enter service with the Russian army by the end of 2025. Thus, Russia is making it clear to the West that a further escalation of the current conflict in Ukraine could be fatal for all NATO countries.
Hospital in southern Gaza and targeted it twice, and in the process killed not only patients, bystanders, and healthcare workers, but journalists as well. The second target was aimed at the area known where journalists gather in order to acquire Wi-Fi from the hospital system. Before you respond, watch this, cut number 10.
So it happened around 10 a.m. this morning. And for context, to give our audience a lay of the land, Nasser Hospital is the largest, the only functioning hospital in the South. And the part of Nasser Hospital that was hit, you guys, is really important. You can see it in the videos. It was a staircase. And the reason this staircase was targeted very clearly is that this is where journalists since the early days of the war have gathered to get Wi-Fi signal. We have seen videos they've posted on social media. Our team, which used to work right close to that staircase, would share videos of them holding their phones to the sky, kind of huddled over laptops in the wee hours of the night. But journalists since the beginning of this war, you guys, since they have been personally displaced, have flocked to hospitals to use resources like Wi-Fi, to use power, to use water. So this staircase, journalists were on the staircase this morning when it was struck around 10 a.m. And as Jonathan just laid out, minutes later, as first responders were racing up to that area, as other journalists in the area were going to cover the strike, another drone strike hit that same exact spot. Mika, we actually have updates from the numbers that you just read. As Jonathan says, this is a very fast-moving story. It is now at least 20 people killed, including 5 journalists. As you mentioned, AP, Reuters, and Al Jazeera have all said that at least 3 of those journalists were working for them. And this brings the total of journalists killed in Gaza since October 7th to 245 journalists, media workers. These are our colleagues, our peers who have been killed in the last 22 months, guys.
All right, what do you have to say?
The truth shall set you free, and that's the problem. Is that journalists, the good journalists, are out there to gather, ground-based truth and share it with a broader audience, so that people can have, a more reality-based understanding of what's going on. Israel is the anti-truth. They are the opposite of the truth. They want to imprison us in their lies. And they view journalists as some of the most existential threats to the continued well-being of Israel, because the journalists are increasingly exposing the crimes of Israel, the duplicity of the Israelis, the absolutely abhorrent behavior on the part of all aspects of the Israeli government, the Israeli military, the Israeli society. And they're also sharing the tragedy that is the ongoing genocide that's taking place in Gaza, the starvation, the deliberate targeting of children, of women, of innocents by the Israelis. The truth shall set you free. Therefore, it's Israel's job to suppress the truth by killing the truth. And that's what they do every time they target a journalist.
And here's the MSNBC reporting, Mika Brzezinski, on the IDF response. And before we play it, bear in mind, consistent with what you just told us, the Israelis have murdered over 250 journalists. Chris, cut number 11.
Israel's defense forces responded to the reports announcing plans to conduct an initial inquiry as soon as possible. It adds, the IDF regrets any harm to uninvolved individuals and does not target journalists as such. The IDF acts to mitigate harm to uninvolved individuals as much as possible while maintaining the safety of IDF troops.
How could she read that with a straight? First of all, stop reading Israeli press releases. They lie. The Israeli government, the Israeli Defense Force, just about every aspect of official Israeli society are natural-born liars. They can't tell the truth about anything, because to tell the truth about what's going on is to expose the fact that Israel is a living manifestation of war crimes from the very beginning of its birth up until the present time today. Israel can't embrace the truth because the truth will condemn Israel. We need to stop treating the Israelis as legitimate sources of information. We need to start treating the Israelis the same way we would treat, the most horrific regimes in history. Would we read the words of Goebbels? Would we read the words of the Nazis as they sought to defend the crimes of Auschwitz? Would we listen to the Nazis say, no, the trains were just running on time. We're here to feed these people. It's delousing, not. Yeah. No, we wouldn't read them because we wouldn't want to give any credibility to them. She's reading in a statement from the Israeli Defense Force excusing mass murder by pretending it was a mistake. No mistake was made. These are drones. These are guided to their target by drone operators who are supervised by Israeli officers who are obeying the orders given to them by higher command to kill journalists. They knew what they were doing. This is just ridiculous. We need to stop legitimizing Israel. We need to start calling them out in every way, shape, and form as the despicable practitioners of genocide that they are. And I apologize for losing my temper, but I mean,
no, you don't have to apologize. Your anger is righteous. The only thing I would add is these creeps from Peter Thiel's Palantir. This is American AI that they have used to target, and they target almost literally the hairs on people's heads. They know exactly who they're targeting.
100%. The complicity of the United States in these crimes is absolute. I just spent a week in Russia talking to some people, including people who were, Russians who were entrapped by U.S. law enforcement on manufactured charges and imprisoned on conspiracy. They didn't commit a crime, but somehow they committed conspiracy. My God, if we were going to use conspiracy as a standard to convict, the United States is guilty from top to bottom of a conspiracy to commit genocide because of how closely we work with the Israeli government in every aspect of it. Even go to Fox News, go to MSNBC, look at how many Israeli, government representatives who are out of the government, former IDF, former intelligence officers who have insinuated themselves into the very fabric of American mainstream media. They're there not to have an honest day's employment. I'm sorry, I have to call it out. They're there to promote the policies of the Israeli government. They've been doing it since day one. We are complicit as a society in the deaths of these Gazan civilians. We murdered them, not just the Israelis.
You know what is so distressing? Never mind Netanyahu's nonsense that this is a blood libel. There is no libel. Truth is a defense. Is that Donald Trump doesn't see this. And Donald Trump could stop it, as Max Blumenthal has said, and you've said 100 times, with a phone call.
One phone call. One phone call, the President of the United States could do the right thing. And, he's not making the phone call because of political reasons. And I have to tell you, I understand politics. I'm not a politician, clearly, but I understand you have to watch what you say. You have to be careful with what you say. You have to measure your words. But if you're political while people are dying, you're a coward. You're a despicable coward. And if you're an American who's silent while people are dying because of things America's doing, you're not much of an American at all. So I know this man's wrapped himself in the mantra of make America great again. But if making America great again requires us to remain silent while our government is complicit in the slaughter of Palestinians, that's not an America that I want to be part of. I believe America's better than that. We're making America lesser.
I don't know who the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations is at the moment. I guess we don't have one at the moment, but whoever it is will be told to veto the following. Chris, cut number 8.
It is a famine. The Gaza famine. It is a famine that we could have prevented if we had been allowed. Yet food stacks up at borders because of systematic obstruction by Israel. It is a famine within a few hundred meters of food in a fertile land that forces a parent to choose which child to feed, that forces people to risk their lives to seek food. It is a famine that we repeatedly warned of, but that the international media has not been allowed in to cover, to bear witness. It is a famine in 2025, a 21st century famine, watched over by drones and the most advanced military technology in history. It is a famine openly promoted by some Israeli leaders as a weapon of war. Everyone owns this. The Gaza famine is the world's famine. It is a famine that asks, but what did you do? A famine caused by cruelty, justified by revenge, enabled by indifference, and sustained by complicity. It is a famine that therefore also asks, and what now will you do? To Prime Minister Netanyahu and anyone who can reach him, enough. Ceasefire. Open the crossings, north and south, all of them. Let us get food and other supplies in, unimpeded. End the retribution. It is too late for far too many, but not for everyone in Gaza. Enough. For humanity's sake, let us in.
It's hard to respond to that. It's so profound and so emotional. Is Iran preparing for another war with Israel?
Iran is ready for another war with Israel. To say they're preparing for another war with Israel is to imply that Iran is the one who is causing the problem here. Israel has made it clear, and so has Donald Trump, that this war isn't over. And they are now confronted with the reality that Iran is not going to surrender, that Iran is not going to bend the knee, that Iran is not going to continue to play the game, the same game that led to the duplicity of the United States and Israel in carrying out a surprise attack against Iran, killing the negotiators as they prepared for a negotiation that President Trump promised not only would occur, but could bring an end to this crisis. Iran will never again trust the West. And so Iran will believe Israel and believe the United States when they say they will respond. So Iran is building the capability to be absolutely devastating in its response to any attack. We have the United States evacuating bases in the Middle East because they understand the next time Iran isn't going to give a courtesy call. The next time Iran strikes, they will strike to kill. And Israel better understand, because Iran now has released evidence of the existence of new weapons that will not only overwhelm their ballistic missile defense systems, but destroy decisively what they hit on the ground. Iran is preparing to do this. Does Iran want to do this? Absolutely not. Iran won't start this fight, but be damn sure that if this fight takes place, Iran's going to finish it on Iran's terms.
Switching gears to Ukraine, in 1 week, President Trump authorized the Iranians to fire thousands of EROMs. I want you to tell me what EROMs are in a minute. And he also said this, Chris, the full screen. It's very hard, if not impossible, to win a war without attacking an invader's country. It's like a great team in sports that has a fantastic defense, but it's not allowed to play offense. there's no chance of winning. It's like that with Ukraine and Russia. Crooked and grossly incompetent Joe Biden would not let Ukraine fight back, only defend. How did that work out? Regardless, this war that never would have happened if I were president, zero chance. Interesting times ahead, President DJT. It sounds like the man who wants to win the Nobel Peace Prize, the man who embraced very warmly Vladimir Putin in Anchorage, who sent an image of a bonding and breaking down of barriers that had been established by the Biden administration, that man now wants to ratchet up the war, America's proxy war against Russia.
Yeah, I mean it's tough language, but let me try to do the impossible and explain Donald Trump. Let's not forget that Donald Trump is fully aware of a certain reality. And that reality is if there are strategic strikes into the depth of Russia carried out by non-nuclear powers acting at the behest or empowered by nuclear powers, Russia will treat that as attack as if it came from the nuclear power. This is Russia's nuclear doctrine, the one that was promulgated last year in November. At that time, the CIA, when reading this nuclear doctrine and considering the fact that Joe Biden was about to give permission to the Ukrainians to use American-provided ATACMS missiles to strike into the strategic depth of Russia, the CIA said there's a better than 50% chance there will be a nuclear war by the end of the year. That's the CIA. That's not Scott Ritter calling, the sky is falling, the sky is falling. That's the CIA giving a cold-hearted assessment that if we allow Ukraine to strike Russia strategically using American-provided weapons, Russia could very well use nuclear weapons in response. This led Donald Trump to make a statement in early December that said, when I'm president, I won't allow this policy to continue, because he understands the ramifications of it. He knows the risks. And so I have to believe that that same knowledge base exists. He's under pressure right now because Ukraine is getting their butts kicked. Every lie Donald Trump was told to tell, because again, he is not the originator of data. He's fed this data by people about the number of Russian casualties, and smaller amounts of Ukrainian casualties have been proven to be a lie. We now know that Ukraine has suffered 1.7 million dead and missing, 625,000 dead and missing this year alone. That's 90,000 a month. 90,000 a month, Ukrainian dead and missing. We know this to be the case. Ukraine can't replace them. Russia is pummeling them. And the president's trying to create the conditions for some sort of ending of this conflict. But in order to do that, he has to be seen as not abandoning Ukraine. So he puts out this god-awful statement, which is as stupid as possible. And then he backs it up by saying that the United States, in 6 weeks' time, I believe, is going to sell Ukraine 3,600 and some odd ERAM missiles, the ERAM missile. The ERAM missile is a missile specifically designed, extended range attack munition, I think it is, specifically designed by the U.S. Air Force in 2023, 2024 for Ukraine. It's supposed to be an accurate system that can be delivered by the aircraft available to the Ukrainians that provide up to 700 kilometers worth of strike distance into Russian territory to level the playing field. The thing about it is, it was conceived in 2023, 2024, but it would take 2 years to bring it up to production. Gosh, I don't know. That's 2025. So they haven't even begun serial production of this munition yet. When they do, the maximum sustained production capacity for ERAMs is 1,000 missiles a year. Now, we are talking 6 weeks from now. If they begin serial production today, we're going to be able to deliver, 10, 15 missiles to Ukraine. And here's the kicker. They can't use them because the United States has to approve the targets. So Trump knows that if the Ukrainians use an ERAM against Russia, the Russians will know that we targeted it. Therefore, we have become directly involved in this conflict. We are a direct participant of this conflict, and that's the end of any peace treaty. So this is just stupidity on the part of the president, who will never allow these weapons to be used because he can't allow these weapons to be used. He knows what will happen. It was a 50% chance of nuclear war last year. I would imagine the odds even gone up given the stakes at play here. So this is just political posturing by the dumbest man in the world. And I'm sitting here trying to work with this guy to bring an end to this conflict, to have better relations, to bring about, nuclear arms control. And he's saying the right things about the potential of this. But then he does something like this. Thank God Vladimir Putin is a very smart man, a very patient man, and he's not going to take the bait. This is just not going to happen. This is something that is not going to happen because it can't happen. We don't have the ability to follow through on this. And even if we were to provide them with these weapons, they can't use them in the way that they would desire to use them because it would get us involved in a war that would very likely end nuclear.
It makes you wonder, General Kellogg, Secretary Rubio, Secretary Hegseth, do they know what's going on? Are they feeding this nonsense to him? Are they encouraging him to say all these things? There's Kellogg. We thought he was out of the picture, but he's right there on the other side of Trump. It's not shown in this picture of Zelensky. So this was a very significant gathering in the Oval Office.
This is Kellogg's.
Or is he listening to Lindsey Graham in a golf cart?
Yeah, this is Kellogg. This is Rubio. Not so much Hegseth, although this is a system that was developed and Hegseth's going to play the economic game. As I said before, Hegseth's a battalion operations officer operating several pay grades above what he should be. He's not qualified to be Secretary of Defense. And this is one of the reasons why. This is the kind of thing you veto. This is the kind of thing you say, hell no. But you got Marco Rubio, who does not want this policy to succeed. And I hope the president understands that Rubio is not his friend, not his ally. Rubio is his enemy. And Rubio is empowered by Keith Kellogg, who is the antithesis of settlement. He's a man who has embraced 100% the Ukrainian narrative. He doesn't, he downplays everything the Russian says. He's the one who pollutes President Trump's mind with the nonsense about casualties. And he's the one who's pushed the ERAM missile solution. It's something that Zelensky's been asking for. This is to placate Zelensky. They gave Kellogg a medal. He marched up yesterday on Ukrainian National Day and received a medal from the Ukrainian president. Why? We now know the answer.
Did the Russians destroy German Taurus missiles over the weekend? And did President Putin more or less say to Chancellor Merz, enough is enough, pal. You want Berlin to look like it did after World War II? Keep this up.
Well, I think Medvedev might have said that. But
all right, I'm getting a little carried away. I apologize.
Yeah, Putin is far more mature, and he doesn't say things like that. He doesn't issue idle threats. But what the Russians are very good at doing is letting actions speak for themselves. And what we've seen over the course of the past week is Russia has begun the deliberate targeting and destruction, not just a signal. In the past, they've sent a cruise missile in to blow up a workshop here, a workshop there to send a signal. We know what's going on. Now they're coming in and leveling facilities. They've leveled an electronics facility, American-made Flex. They've taken out the facility that was built by the Germans to produce long-range missiles, including analogs of the Taurus. And they're showing that their intelligence is impeccable, meaning that they can track material into Ukraine and target it before it becomes operational. And this should be a lesson to anybody talking about the ERAM. It will never be used. They're going to show up in airfields in Western Ukraine, and the Russians will deploy the weapon systems necessary to take them out. The Russians, they've been producing, I guess apparently they have a lot of washing machines because apparently they need those chips from the washing machines to make their missiles work. But their missile production is way up. At the beginning of the war, they would parse out, a Kinzhal here, a Kinzhal there, a Zircon, but they didn't want to use these weapons because they didn't have that many of them. You always have to keep some in reserve in case the balloon goes up with NATO. Now they're just pop 6 Kinzhals. 6 into a single factory to level it. Why? Because defense industry is pumping them out like candy. So I think, this game is over. The Russians, just the other day, Russia respected the Ukrainian National Day, not a single attack, total respect. And during that time, Ukraine reached out and struck Russian, refining capacity outside of Leningrad and elsewhere. You really think tonight's going to be a quiet night in Ukraine? You think that this week's going to be quiet in Ukraine? Ukraine's going to get flattened. Again, only military targets and all that. But the Russians, they're not playing games right now. They are in the process of collapsing the Ukrainian military on the battlefield, and they're going to collapse Ukraine's military defense industry. They're going to make it clear to Europe that no amount of money you provide will result in anything meaningful, that every dollar, every euro you spend in Ukraine will be destroyed. And this is at a time when the German economy, because of the policies of the German government, is on the verge of absolute collapse.
You have as great an understanding of the Russian mentality as any American that I know. And it's because of your homework, much of which you've done in Russia, interacting with Russian people. What do you think the Kremlin thinks Trump is up to? Does he really want peace?
My understanding, and again, this is just my take, is that the Russians truly believe that Donald Trump is looking for an off-ramp. And that left to his own devices, he would definitely, we'd be out of this conflict already. They also recognize, and they said this over and over again, the obstacles that he faces. The Russians understand that not only does he face opposition in the opposing party, but even within his own party, within Congress, people who have bought into this conflict, people who've embraced the narrative that Ukraine is good, Russia is bad. Donald Trump is fighting decades of Russophobia, the infection of the American mindset, so that we're programmed to accept at face value anything negative said about Russia. We're incapable of processing anything positive or the Russian reality. They understand that the academic institutions in the United States are thoroughly corrupt. When you have Hillary Clinton and Victoria Nuland teaching Russian area studies at Columbia, when you have Michael McFaul polluting the minds of Stanford graduates, you can't have sound academic foundations upon which to build positive outcomes. They know that even within Donald Trump's own inner circle, people who are supposed to be supporting him don't support him. Marco Rubio is not a fan of these policies. Keith Kellogg is sabotaging him. Pete Hegseth is too stupid to live when it comes to Russia. Doesn't know what he's doing. Steve Witkoff is a loyal, lieutenant, but he's not the originator of policy. His job is to take the president's desires and take him to Russia and see them, enacted upon. But he's not there to articulate original thought about Russia because he's incapable of it. In fact, whenever you delve into details, nuances about Russia, Witkoff falls apart because he knows nothing about Russia at all. This president is ill-served by his administration, by the establishment, by the American people. But the Russian government still has faith that Donald Trump, whom they respect, they are willing to tolerate any amount of nonsense because they understand the political reality in which he operates. They believe that he wants to find a path towards peace. And that's why they continue to put up with this garbage. That's why they continue to be patient, because otherwise they could just unplug.
I will spare you Lindsey Graham's latest, but I cannot spare you President Macron's latest. I don't know if you've seen this, but if this is the attitude of European leaders about Russia, World War III is around the corner. Chris, cut number 9.
So, a country that invests 40% of its budget in such equipment, that has mobilized an army of more than 1,300,000 men, it will not return to a state of peace and an open democratic system overnight. Let's not be naive. And so, even for its own survival, it needs to keep feeding itself. That's it. So, it's a predator, it's an ogre at our doorstep. I'm not saying that France will be attacked as soon as tomorrow, but still, it's a threat to Europeans. We must not be naive. And I say this with immense respect for the Russian people, for that country, its great history, its tradition, and its leaders. But that's where we are. We must not be naive.
I have to say, Judge, when I went to Russia in December of 23, January 24, and I went to the Donbass, and I visited. I didn't get to the front lines. They wouldn't let me anywhere near. They're not going to let a 64-year-old American, man die. But I got to interview the soldiers and some of the generals off the front line and talk to them They gave me this patch to wear on my coat, and it's an orc. It's it's an orc because the Ukrainians call them orcs, and we just heard Macron call them ogres. The Russians, they're no longer insulted by stupidity of this nature. First of all, they don't take Macron seriously at all. He's a non-entity, a non-factor. What does France bring to the table? Nothing. No military, force of any note. France is nullified. If the political trends continue, Macron won't be president very long. There'll be a new party in place that will reverse trend. So this is Macron just being stupid. But the sad thing is, Macron's the words that he used are words that could have easily been spoken by any of the European political and economic elite. This is an infection of the minds of the Europeans. This is the danger of Russophobia here in America, because what we're seeing is Russophobia on the extreme end, the extreme spectrum. This is what happens when you are infected with Russophobia. You start to speak in this manner. It's so devoid of reality, so far removed from the Russian reality and what Russian policy is and what the Russians want. He ignores history. Why is there 1.3 million soldiers in Russia? Because NATO expanded to Finland and Sweden, compelling Russia to do things like, put 70,000 men on outside of St. Petersburg to protect it against, NATO troops coming out of Finland, to expand the Kola Peninsula force. Russia didn't want to do this. Russia wasn't seeking to expand its military, but it has no choice when NATO expands to its very borders. When NATO provides hundreds of billions of dollars of military equipment to allow the Ukrainian army to build up to the size of 800,000. Russia has a military of 1.3 million. That's to cover everything. And the Russians are kicking the hell out of 800,000 NATO-trained, equipped Ukrainian soldiers in Ukraine. Macron is just literally an imbecile, a moron. I apologize. I shouldn't use words like that. My wife gets very mad at me. But no, this is insulting to the Russians, what he said. But the good news is the Russians have a hell of a good sense of humor. Like I said, their response will be just to wear more of these.
Scotty, you're the best. Thank you very much, my dear friend. Please don't apologize for your words or for your anger. I am sure that Mrs. Ritter is accustomed to them by now, as are we. Thank you, my dear friend. We'll look forward to seeing
In the framework of an official visit by the Minister of People's Power for Defense, Pedrino Lopez, the Bolivarian Navy of Venezuela confirmed the reception and incorporation of new Iranian-origin CM-90 anti-ship missiles. The news, circulated through videos and images, highlights the opening of facilities for the maintenance and sustainment of these missiles, acquired by the Venezuelan government from the Iranian regime.
They got things in their stockpile.
These are stationed at the Agustin Armerio Naval Base in Puerto Cabello to support new Iranian equipment recently acquired. As recent reports have been indicating, military cooperation between Venezuela and Iran has been deepening over the past months and years. One of the milestones of this bilateral relationship in the naval sphere was the acquisition for the Bolivarian Navy of new Patriot missile boats, which were unveiled at the Naval Review held in July last year. While further details are not known, the incorporation of new CM-90 anti-ship missiles presumably forms part of the completion process for the new Patriot missile boats. Designed as a means of coastal defense, these fast and agile vessels are heavily armed for their size, equipped with anti-ship missile launchers and torpedo launch tubes, complemented in later models with remote weapon stations.
Regarding the SM-90 missile, it was officially unveiled by Iran in 2022, during the Dimdex 2022 exhibition, where its approximate size was observed. It has a diameter of 280 millimeters, an approximate weight of 350 kilograms, and a length of 4.16 meters. According to announcements from the Iranian regime, it is equipped with an active guidance radar and a turbojet engine that gives it a range of approximately 90 kilometers. With the confirmation of this new capability by the Bolivarian Navy, the National Bolivarian Armed Forces continue a process of replacement and recovery of capabilities, replacing systems of Western origin with those provided by other suppliers, aligned with the stance of the Venezuelan government. Russia and Iran emerge as the main suppliers of armaments, with an increasing presence of Iranian equipment being observed. In this regard, another segment explored by Venezuela following trends observed in the Ukrainian conflict is the development of loitering munitions, based on models from the Shad family manufactured by Iran and actively employed by Russia against Ukraine, receiving the designation Zamora V1.
On a sneak peek with it, like they try to do Iran.
mysterious naval platforms silently slip out from Iran, sailing thousands of kilometers under the cover of secrecy, inching to within just 2,000 kilometers of the U.S. coastline. These vessels may look like ordinary ships, indistinguishable from the hundreds of naval vessels roaming the seas, but hidden within their hulls lies a weapon of terror. Long-range missiles of unknown origin, capable of striking major American cities or crippling strategic military bases in mere moments. As Israel prepares for potential new military strikes against Iran's nuclear facilities, Tehran subtly showcases its deadliest weapons, sending an indirect warning to the White House. Any attack on Iranian territory will not go unanswered. And this time, the retaliation could come from the sea, targeting the heart of the United States itself. The question haunting American military planners remains: what are these mysterious missiles, and how can Tehran deliver them across the oceans to strike the U.S. mainland? Many secrets and details we reveal to you, dear viewer, in this video. Stay tuned. Abu Mahdi, the long-range strike weapon. The Abu Mahdi is a long-range cruise missile exceeding 2,000 kilometers in range, capable of targeting all U.S. bases in the Gulf, as well as Tel Aviv and Haifa from deep within Iranian territory. It is powered by a turbojet engine that propels it at speeds up to 0.7 Mach, ideal for low-altitude flight over the sea, making it a silent shadow creeping toward its target, almost impossible to detect or intercept. Measuring approximately 7.5 meters in length and weighing around 2,500 kilograms, Abu Mahdi was built using reverse engineering techniques based on the Russian Kh-55 missiles, acquired indirectly from Ukraine during the 1990s. The Iranian version incorporates modern guidance systems that rely on inertial navigation and GPS satellites under Iranian control. The missile carries a 450-kilogram warhead, capable of destroying aircraft carriers or crippling Israel's largest ports with a single strike. Abu Mahdi is launched from naval platforms, either surface ships or small submarines equipped with modified launch tubes, which could be the secret platforms Iran hinted at for striking U.S. shores. Abu Mahdi is not just a conventional weapon. It is a direct message to Washington that the vast distance between Iran and the U.S. is no longer a barrier to Tehran's missile capabilities. Qadar 474, crawling silently toward United States. While the Qadar family is better known for ballistic missiles, this version represents a leap into the long-range cruise missile category. The Iranian built it on reverse-engineered Russian missiles like the Kh-55 and Kh-35. It has a range of 2,000 kilometers and carries a warhead weighing around 500 kilograms. What sets Qadar 474 apart is its versatility. It can be launched from ships or mobile ground platforms, featuring dual navigation systems using both inertial guidance and digital mapping, allowing an accuracy of just 10 meters. The missile powered by a domestically developed turbojet, the missile can cruise for hours at very low altitudes, no higher than 50 meters above sea level, keeping it virtually invisible to American radar. In any potential engagement against the U.S. fleet in the Gulf, Qadar 474 could pose a nightmare for aircraft carriers and destroyers accustomed to operating safely beyond Tehran's immediate reach. Against Israel, it provides Iran the option to strike strategic targets without risking conventional aircraft. How Iran could bring these missiles within 2,000 kilometers of U.S. shores. It may seem incredible that Iranian missiles could threaten Washington or New York, but the scenario is far from impossible. Iran possesses several naval methods to transport launch platforms close to the U.S. coast. First, massive transport and logistics ships can be modified to carry cruise missile launchers. The most likely scenario involves small, domestically developed submarines capable of concealing launch tubes. A third option includes fast, armed boats that, while limited in range, can deliver missiles to temporary launch sites. Additionally, Iran's cooperation with countries like Venezuela provides a strategic option to deploy platforms in the Caribbean or Western Atlantic, reducing the distance to under 2,000 kilometers from major U.S. cities. Through bold naval maneuvers, Tehran could place U.S. shores within the striking range of its missiles. Hidden platforms striking from Yemen. These missiles do not only threaten the United States. Israel already falls within the range of Abu Mahdi and Qadar, making its cities, airports, and nuclear facilities potential targets in any future confrontation. The U.S. fleet in the Gulf is no longer safe either, as these missiles can launch from deep inside Iran to strike carriers and destroyers wherever they are. Intelligence reports also indicate that Iran may have transferred some of these missiles to its proxies in Yemen, giving it the ability to threaten shipping in the Red Sea, the Suez Canal, and even the southern Mediterranean. In the end, Iran is no longer only thinking defensively. It is pursuing long-range offensive capabilities that act as a significant bargaining chip against Washington. With rising tensions and the potential for renewed direct confrontation between Iran and Israel, which could draw in the United States, the most pressing question for you, dear viewer, if such a confrontation erupts, will Iran dare to move these missile platforms closer to U.S. shores? Or are these threats merely political leverage on the table? Tell us your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to support us by liking the video and subscribing to the channel to receive all the latest.
Professor Morandi is back with us. Welcome back, Professor.
Thank you, Nima. It's a pleasure being on your show.
Let me start with what has happened in Australia, and what has happened to the Iranian ambassador to Australia. They called him persona non grata. It's somehow amazing that Israel is just they called Lula persona non grata. What's going on in Australia?
Well, apparently the Iranian ambassador has been helping carry out genocide in Gaza. That's as I assume that's what it is, because the Israeli ambassador is doing fine in Australia, and the Australian regime has no problem with him. So it must be the Iranian who's committing crimes against humanity and starving babies and involved in slaughtering families on a daily basis. This is pressure from Netanyahu. We saw a few days ago Netanyahu send a letter to the Australian Prime Minister, effectively threatening him. I tweeted this a couple of hours ago. It was on, I think, anyway, you can find it on either, I think, the Jerusalem Post. If I'm not mistaken. But the Australian regime is under pressure from the Israelis. We've seen the protests in Australia, and very impressive. And the people of Australia should be very proud of themselves for taking this stand, both last week and this week. So the Australian government is under a lot of pressure to recognize Palestine, even though it's meaningless. Recognizing Palestine does nothing for the Palestinian people. It's just a piece of paper. But even that is that's being carried out to ease the pressure that the public is putting on them. But the Israeli regime doesn't even want that, and they put pressure on the Australian government, and they just simply, out of the blue, come and blame Iran for all their problems at home. And something that I am concerned about is that since things are really bad for the Israeli regime, and it's going downhill very quickly, the world has turned against it, and you see even Western leaders protesting and complaining and speaking out, even though they're not going to do anything about it. There are no sanctions on Tel Aviv. There are no limitations to the being put on the atrocities being carried out against the Palestinian people, not just in Gaza, but also the West Bank and southern Lebanon, across Lebanon. They're carrying out crimes everywhere, and of course Yemen, we just saw a couple of days ago. So there are no limitations being put on them, no sanctions, nothing. But in any case, the world has turned against the regime, and Western elites who are firmly in the camp of the genocidal monsters, they even have to speak out against the Israelis. So what I'm concerned about is that there may be a false flag operation somewhere in some country against Western interests in the United States, somewhere in Europe, or something directed at Western citizens, so that the Israeli regime could perhaps change the narrative. So this is something that I'm not saying will happen. I have no idea. I have no intelligence or anything like that. But these things have happened often in the past. And what we're seeing in Australia is a small example where the Australian regime tries to distract attention away from what the Israeli regime is doing, and they try to blame Iran for things that have nothing to do with Iran. Iran is the only country in the region that has a Jewish MP in parliament. It has a significant, small but significant Jewish community, and in Iran, Jews do not have any problems whatsoever. Iran's problem, of course, is with Zionism. So this is basically a distraction, and they've done it to appease Netanyahu, and it just shows how powerful the Israeli, the Zionist lobby is. It's not just the United States; it expands across the Western world.
Professor Marandi, do you consider what the attack on Yemen as the same sort of is the outcome of desperation in Israel? That's why they were attacking. It seems that they wanted to assassinate the Yemeni leaders and the Houthi leaders. That they failed. That they said we didn't want to do this. We wanted to target some, I don't know, buildings in Yemen. I don't know what was the strategy, but it seems that it was assassination. The main goal was assassination. Your take on that?
Well, we can look at it both ways. The Yemeni missile that targeted Israel obviously got through, and there was impact. and that made the Israeli regime very angry. And that doesn't, carrying out assassinations in Yemen doesn't necessarily mean that, I mean, these two could be linked. The assassination attempts could be a sort of revenge because the Yemeni missiles are having an impact. And obviously, people who want to travel to Palestine or people who work there, when they feel insecure being there, that harms the Israeli regime in a big way. And it harms it much more than it harms Yemen, because Yemen does not have foreign investment. It doesn't have people from abroad working there. And Yemen doesn't have much of they don't have much infrastructure because the Saudis and the Americans have been bombing it for many years. The Saudis and the Americans, they carried out and the collective West, and the Emiratis and Turkey and Qatar initially were with them too, but they were carrying out a genocidal campaign against the Yemeni people for years. And therefore, they don't have that much infrastructure for the Israeli regime to strike. And their military assets are all deep underground. And we saw how the Americans tried for a full month to destroy Yemen's armed forces, and they failed. Trump capitulated. It was clear as day. They gained nothing from the conflict. So the Israeli regime doesn't have capabilities that the Americans don't have. American capabilities are much greater than that of the regime. So if the Americans cannot defeat Yemen, then obviously the Israeli regime can't either. There's no indication that any senior official from Yemen has been martyred. And if someone was martyred, we'd hear it in the news. There would be funerals. So we can say that the Israeli regime did target civilians. They targeted civilian assets like the power plant, but they had no success militarily speaking.
Do you think that if Nobel Peace Prize was for real, Yemen would get it?
Oh, yes.
Who is going to be your candidate for that?
The Ansarullah would be they would receive the Nobel Peace Prize, but Hezbollah would also be very much there as well. Hezbollah and Ansarullah have made enormous sacrifices, and the people of Lebanon and Yemen have made enormous sacrifices to help the people of Gaza. Iran, of course, has made huge sacrifices, but of course, what we see in Lebanon and Yemen is at a different level. What Yemen has done is that they have shown the world that you can boycott the Israeli regime and make them pay a price for the genocide. You can block their trade and have an impact. But sadly, countries like Turkey, Jordan, Egypt, Azerbaijan, the United Arab Emirates, Morocco, in our region alone, they continue to do business as usual with the regime, transporting oil, selling oil, buying and selling goods. It's and we cannot expect countries in Latin America, although they should, but we cannot expect countries in Latin America and in Africa to cut off ties with the Israeli regime when they see these countries continuing to have diplomatic ties and carry out business transactions. If Turkey had done the moral thing and broken off ties, if the Emirates had done the same, if Morocco and the others had done this, then there would have been a lot of pressure across the global south to cut off ties. And that would have been catastrophic for Tel Aviv. But they show that they are not with the resistance and they're not with the Palestinians. The governments, of course, not the people. The people across the region are pro-Palestinian and anti-apartheid and anti-Zionist. But I would give the Nobel Peace Prize to the leader of Ansarullah, and the leader of Hezbollah would be a close second.
Yeah.
Of course, Hamas is fighting for the people of Palestine, but as someone who's trying to, from the outside, to bring an end to this genocide, I would give these two, the leaders of these two organizations, the Nobel Peace Prize. And it's really disturbing how in Lebanon, and those who were criticizing Hezbollah for accepting a ceasefire, I think now they must recognize what pressure Hezbollah is facing. Inside Lebanon, Hezbollah has Western-backed and Takfiri-backed enemies that are constantly stabbing it in the back. And while Hezbollah wants to help the people of Palestine, it has to focus on the traitors in Lebanon. And of course, next door in Syria, we'll now see all of the predictions of Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah being fulfilled. In Syria, the regime, the Al-Qaeda and ISIS regime of Jolani is now negotiating with the Israelis, and it's quite possible that they'll come to an agreement. That's exactly what we were all predicting, and of course, that first and foremost, Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, and that this whole dirty war in Syria had nothing to do with any revolution, had nothing to do with the emancipation of the Syrian people. It had everything to do with strengthening the Israeli regime, weakening the resistance to this regime, and there was a collaboration of regional regimes led by NATO and the United States in particular. All of this was done to help Israel, and the regime has benefited from it. But the good thing is that everyone has been exposed now. And that I think is worth a lot. Some people say that it doesn't matter, but I think it's worth quite a lot. Everyone has shown their hand. Everyone has shown who they are in the region and beyond. And of course, the Israeli regime, first and foremost, has exposed itself to the world for the genocidal criminals that they are collectively, especially since ordinary people in Palestine, the Zionists, they support the genocide. So everyone has been exposed, and you can't put a number on that. This is infinitely valuable.
I think when we compare Hezbollah to Yemen, it's somehow different because Hezbollah is under a lot of pressure in Lebanon from inside and from outside. On Yemen, they cannot do anything. As you mentioned, the United States went to the Red Sea, they couldn't do anything. Israel is bombing every day Yemen, and they don't care about what Israel is doing. They're responding to what Israel is doing. This is somehow, I would say, game changer. It's something that doesn't fit in the calculation that the West has in the region.
Absolutely. And in Lebanon, you see that the same Takfiri groups that are standing shoulder to shoulder with the fascists like Sami Jaja and the Lebanese forces and Western regimes, all of them are focused on against Hezbollah rather than against the Israeli regime. Just like in Syria, we have a regime that says our only enemies are Hezbollah and Iran. So these Takfiris never had any real animosity towards the Israeli regime. They never supported the Palestinian people. But this is all coming out now. Their supporters in the West, especially those who receive money from oil and gas-rich countries in the region, their news outlets, their media outlets, their cultural centers, their political organizations, they will continue to try to justify this because they're on the payroll. They'll continue to try to be apologists for these groups. But I think for those who are independent-minded, for those who are fair-minded, for those who are looking at the region with open eyes, they see the reality. It's become clear as day. These Takfiri groups from day one were a tool of the West, and they've been very useful. And Erdogan and Abdullah of Jordan and the Qatari regime and others, they've worked very hard to help the Americans carry out their policy in the region.
I don't know if you saw the video that shows the British intelligence is gathering information from Gaza to deliver deliver the information to Israelis. You're looking at the behavior of the British government. On one side, they're trying to say condemn Israel, condemn what's going on in Gaza, starvation, all of that. But you see they're providing intelligence targets to Israel. And Israel is just looking at the outcome. The targets are civilians. They're not killing Hamas. Even Israelis, they're confessing that what they're doing is just killing civilians.
Well, they're not confessing. That document was leaked. It came out that overwhelmingly it is civilians that have been killed, according to the regime itself. And what the British have been doing, they've been doing since day one. They've been providing intelligence, and they will continue to do so. They've been doing it for almost 2 years now. They are a part of this genocide, and they know too. Just like the Israeli document. I mean, that document was secret for us, but it wasn't secret for the allies of the regime. They all knew that there was a genocide being carried out. It's all out in the open. I did an interview just recently, and the host was trying to say, trying not to acknowledge that this was a genocide. And I said, the intention from day one was a genocide. If anyone looks at this, if anyone goes back and looks at the South African complaint at the ICJ, which was over a year and a half ago, all the statements that they put together from the Israeli regime's president, the prime minister, the minister of the defense, or genocide, and MPs and the Speaker of Parliament, all of them were speaking about genocide. They were saying there are no innocents in Gaza. They were saying we're going to cut off food, water, electricity, medicine. This was all said in October 2023. So for someone today to still try to pretend that this is not a genocide, it's disturbing. It's disturbing, to say the least. It's the least that one can do today is to openly declare that this is a genocide. That's the least one could do. What everyone should do is to stand up and to protest and to put pressure on governments to bring this to an end, to cut relations with the Israeli regime, especially people living in our part of the world. We see people across Australia courageously coming to the streets. I'm sure many of them will pay some sort of price, or could pay a price for their stance at work, and in if they're government employees or in the private sector, some could pay a price for that. And so when people across the world are paying a price, then people in our region should be willing to stand up and be counted.
The Israeli Knesset opposition leader Yair Lapid, he said that Gaza is turning into Israeli Afghanistan. Do you feel that somehow Netanyahu is losing its sort of, because he had some sort of leverage over these people in Israel? He still has that. But how do you see this situation in Gaza, the pressure coming to Netanyahu, and the internal things that are the internal interactions that were happening in Israel?
Well, Nima, you know my view on this, I think, and I think your audience knows this. From the beginning, I believe that the Israeli regime was losing this war, these series of wars, and then everything that it has done has been catastrophic for itself and for the collective West. The West has paid a huge price because Western regimes have no credibility. Western journalists, legacy media journalists, have no credibility. Western institutions, no credibility. International institutions dominated by the West have no credibility. That's gone. They put an end to all of this permanently, and there's no price tag that you could put on this. It's just the loss for the West cannot be calculated with numbers. But the Israeli regime, it failed in Gaza. Its image has been destroyed. It's failed in Lebanon. It's failed in Yemen. It's failed everywhere. It's failed everywhere. It's even failed in Syria. I said from the beginning that in Syria it was a tactical loss, and it will continue to be painful for the resistance, for Lebanon, for the people of Syria, and for the people of Palestine, because that front has been basically shut down. But in a sense, it's been a strategic defeat for the Israeli regime and NATO regimes and its allies, because everything that we've been saying for so many years has turned out to be true. The resistance, the axis of resistance has been vindicated. Those who were attacking Hezbollah now see who the traitors in Lebanon are when it comes to the Palestinian people. Those who used to attack Ansarullah and belittle them and support the Saudi genocide and the Emirati genocide, now they see Hezbollah, Ansarullah as heroes. The same is true with Iran. Iran, which has paid a huge price, not just during the 12 days. If Iran's support for Gaza was not exceptionally important, there would be no war against Iran. If Iran if the axis of resistance was not doing so many things to help the Palestinian cause, they wouldn't be attacked in the first place. But the most important thing that comes out of this is that the Israeli regime's image has been demolished. The West's image has been demolished. Those who oppose the resistance, they have been exposed. None of them have done anything for the Palestinian people. Qatar and Saudi Arabia, their sovereign wealth fund, they've invested in Israel through Kushner. They have investments in Israel through Trump's son-in-law. How far, where does treason start? And of course, I've explained what other countries have done, and your audience knows it better than I. So I think that since the emperor has no clothes, everyone has been exposed. This is good for the resistance, because people across the world now, everything has become clear. The fog has gone away. The fog has disappeared. We see who stands with the Palestinian people and who doesn't. And Netanyahu, he can continue with these wars. He may carry out another attack on Iran. He may continue to bomb Yemen. He bombs Lebanon regularly and murders Lebanese citizens on a daily basis, something that the Western media ignores, even though they have offices in Beirut. But it's hurting Israel. The contempt for the Israeli regime across the globe is being solidified. The longer this lasts, it becomes stronger. It becomes more permanent. It is not going to escape what it has been carrying out over the past 2 years. So, in my opinion, the longer this lasts, it's like in the old movies where someone would fall in quicksand, and the more he moved around, the more he would sink in the quicksand. Although apparently that's not how quicksand works, but in real life. But anyway.
Yeah. On Saturday, I talked with Lieutenant Colonel Anthony Aguilar. He was in Gaza. He reported on what's going on in Gaza. When I asked him, how did you find the situation in Gaza? He said something, I think it's so deep to just think of it. He said that the ideology of IDF, when you work with them, is that all Arabs and Muslims are the enemy. They have to be killed. And so he said, so what could you imagine the outcome of that in Gaza?
There's no difference between ISIS and Al-Qaeda and Zionism in that respect. They consider anyone that stands in their way as worthy of death. And not only do they hate Arabs and Muslims, they hate everyone. They hate Christians. We see how they treat Christians in Palestine. It's only the Christian Zionists who have been active in trying to fool ordinary people in the United States and across the West, or religious Christians, about the nature of Israel with their cult and the nonsense that they promote. But yeah, I've seen a couple of his interviews, and they are very, very painful to watch. It's not something that is a secret to us, because we know they speak out openly. Just a couple of days ago, an Israeli MP, she spoke about, or maybe yesterday, she spoke about extermination. she said these are Amalek, and we shouldn't be ashamed to wipe them out. That's how it is. But the West, they support this. Western journalists, they support this. If they don't support it, they're too cowardly to do anything about it. Either they're bought off or they have the Epstein-like problems. And now with AI and the new technologies, they can obtain all sorts of information on people through their laptops and cell phones and tablets, and there are so many different means to gather information on people. That's why your audience, especially since I'm sure most of them are pro-Palestine, they should be very wary about their having their personal information access through cell phones or through laptops or through tablets, and the images that can be recorded through all of these.
We've learned that Armenia and Britain have agreed to elevate their relations to the level of strategic partnership. Do you understand what does the United Kingdom want from Armenia? What is that strategic partnership? What do they need to come to Armenia?
Well, you said something earlier, and I forgot to respond to that, and that was about the British intelligence support for the Israeli regime through Cyprus. By the way, the planes and the drones fly from Cyprus. So Cyprus is deeply involved in this Holocaust, and their leaders have blood on their hands, a lot of blood on their hands. They're just like Netanyahu. They're no different. But the British, that's what they're doing in Ukraine as well. The British are the most extreme of all of the entire West. Even though the UK is collapsing and the economy is falling apart, and they're probably, the situation in the UK is probably worse than any other European power, major European power, and the situation in Europe is not good at all. But despite all that, the British are the most fanatical when it comes to Ukraine and Russia, and their support for the Israeli regime is quite stunning and extraordinary. But they're not powerful. They don't have the ability to project power. They don't have more than a few thousand troops that they can send here and there. The government in Baku, as well as the Armenian government, both of them, I think, are misreading the situation. Baku, instead of trying to have good relations with Iran and Russia, it's still under the influence of the United States. It has become an ally of Netanyahu and the Israeli regime, whereas its neighbors are Iran and Russia. Its two key neighbors are Iran and Russia. And the same is true with Armenia. The Armenian government, instead of trying to have good relations with Russia, and instead of ignoring Iran's some of the things that Iran has been telling them to do or not to do, they have put faith in countries that are never going to do anything for them. NATO is not going. I don't even know how long NATO is going to last, but Armenia cannot rely on the strength of the British. So I don't take anything that the British, any agreement between the UK and Armenia as important, especially as the war in Ukraine continues. The war in Ukraine, Nima, will continue to drain Western resources. Maybe Trump will stop funding it. And of course, we don't know what the CIA will do because they have all sorts of hidden money here and there. But the Europeans, apparently, from what we're seeing, they're going to continue waging this war. And so the European economy is going to go downhill even further. It's been bad. It's been going from bad to worse. So they're in no position to change the balance of power in the Caucasus. Remember, these are the seven dwarves, as I don't know who first said this, but these are the seven dwarves who we saw Maybe it was George Galloway. I'm not sure. But these, the seven dwarfs sitting in front of Trump and behaving like children at school, or at least they look like children at school. These are not the sort of leaders that are going to be able to do anything in the Caucasus. And as I said before, Iran will not allow borders to be changed, and Iran will not allow its access to Armenia and through Armenia to Georgia or the Black Sea or Russia to be blocked. It won't happen. If that happens, there will be war. It's as simple as that. And the United States is not going to go to war with Iran over the southern province of Armenia and the Republic of Azerbaijan. They would be very foolish if they even tried anything against Iran. So as long as Armenia's sovereignty is preserved, then Iran doesn't have a problem. But as soon as that changes, then there will be military confrontation. Iran has already based large numbers of troops on the border. Sometimes you see things online. Someone quotes something that some politician in Iran said, or someone says something that he shouldn't have said. But Iran's policy is clear as day.
I think, Professor Marandi, you mentioned the case of Ukraine. There are a lot to be learned from what has happened in Ukraine. Is the British role in what's going on in Ukraine? They were still providing. Zelensky is totally protected by British intelligence, and you talk about CIA. CIA right now it's behind the scene, but you see the British how they're doing everything in Ukraine. And I would argue, do you think that the Iranian government would be concerned about what's going on in Armenia, considering the British government coming to Armenia? Because they may play the same role in Armenia.
Yes, Iran is definitely concerned, but Iran is not really that concerned about the British. They're more concerned about the Americans. Yes, the British, they play a destructive role, you're right, but they cannot project power. They have no ability to fight Iran anywhere at any time. So yes, it's definitely not a good thing. No one is in Tehran is happy to see the Armenian government to have this sort of relationship with the West, and it's not a smart policy. It never has been, especially as I said, the main neighbors are Iran and Russia. But again, as I said, there are many things that the Republic of Azerbaijan does that Armenia may do that we do not approve. But if it's within if it's their sovereign right as an independent country to do so, we're not going to do anything. Iran is not going to do anything about it. But the issue of sovereignty is something that Iran has already been very clear about, and Iran has acted upon it. Before General Bagheri was martyred, he made that very clear when on the border with Azerbaijan and Armenia. And things happened there that sent a clear message to Iran's northern neighbors that Iran will not tolerate any change in border. It's very clear. This is not going to happen. If it does, then there will be war. It's as simple as that. Iran will occupy southern Armenia, and it will not leave. So that's something that the Americans, Aliyev, and the Armenians should think about seriously.
We know that Russian President Vladimir Putin talked with Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian, and both of them going to be in SCO summit. They're going to go to SCO summit. And how do you find the importance of this summit? We're going to have all of the leaders, all of the presidents of countries there to talk to each other.
Very important, especially after what Trump has done to the Indians and the Brazilians. Both the SCO and BRICS, I think, have their role and their position has been enhanced. So in the case of BRICS, both Brazil and India, they've been hurt by the United States. They've been severely angered, and they have an incentive to strengthen their ties with other BRICS nations, and also, as a result, strengthen BRICS. And in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, obviously, we see the same with India. And of course, Iran's president is going to be at the conference, and then he's going to stay on for along with the others for the military parade. So he'll be there, I think, for 3 days at least. He will meet the Indian Prime Minister, as of course the Chinese president, and of course President Putin. Although they've had a phone conversation, but they'll be meeting in person, and all these leaders will be meeting one another and other leaders of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. So I think it is going to. The circumstances have changed. China and India, their problem, India and Pakistan, very problematic relationship is not going to go away. I mean, the problems are not going to go away, but I think that there are new opportunities now, thanks to the behavior of Trump and his imposing tariffs on India, whereas the Europeans are also using Russian oil, as we all know, and gas.
The report, I don't know if you saw, Scott Bessent, the U.S. Treasury Secretary, said that the importation of Russian oil from 1% went to 41%, more than 41% in India. And the United States trying to put pressure on India. India just said, no, we're not going to do that. And do you feel Donald Trump came to office in Washington talking about why do we need Russia and Iran to be our enemy? Why do we have sanctions on Iran and Russia? Because this would weaken, this sort of attitude would weaken dollar. Did you see anything that the Trump administration has done in order to change that problem, to deal with that problem?
Well, we are, as relations strengthened between countries across the global south, BRICS members, Shanghai Cooperation Organization members, the importance of the dollar decreases in relative terms, because a lot of the transactions are being carried out in local currencies, or in some cases in currency that's not the American dollar. And that's not going to be good for the U.S. dollar. But I think also what's happening with the Federal Reserves, you may see further decline soon. If it seems that Powell is capitulating to Trump, and that interest rates will probably go down, and that will lead to a further decline in the U.S. dollar. And this is not, I'm not an economist, but those who are well versed in these affairs say that this is not the magic bullet that's going to save the U.S. economy. In fact, they say that it's going to make the situation much worse for ordinary Americans. So Trump is doing exactly as I think many of us expected. He's a weak leader. He has shown himself to be weak. He is easily influenced by those around him. And every day he changes his position, and that makes the United States even less credible. Some like to think that this unpredictability is a strength. No, it's not a strength. Or this pretending to be a madman or mad dog is a strength for the United States. It isn't, because what it does is that it makes countries think about finding alternative solutions and to find new partners, because they just don't want to have this problem. So, and we see how right now the United States is treating its allies. It's forcing them to kneel. It's basically saying that the Europeans and the Japanese and the Koreans and anyone who has anything to do with the United States, they must pay tribute. It's like the kings of old, where people had to go and give them gifts and please the king. They're hurting their own so-called allies more than anyone else, but their allies are not really that important anymore. The European leaders are the same people who we saw sitting like obedient school children in the White House. Their weight, they have no weight anymore. They have no standing anymore. They have no significance anymore. Iran doesn't take the Europeans serious anymore. This was not the case even 20 years ago. So Trump, I think, is basically pushing U.S. decline, is increasing the pace of U.S. decline, and he's also making the United States more hated across the world by fully supporting the genocide, regardless of what the reasons are, what sort of information, or the Epstein or the Mossad has on him or on people around him, or whatever the reason. His full support for the genocide, his crude behavior towards different countries, insulting world leaders. He threatens Iran. He insults India. That sort of behavior is not working for the United States. It may, some of his supporters may close their eyes to reality, I'm sure, but it's not helping the United States at all.
He had a meeting with the president of South Korea in which he was talking about denuclearization. I talked with John Helmer today, and he said when he's talking about denuclearization, he's not talking about the United States or anybody in Europe. He's talking about North Korea. Do you feel it feels somehow, for me, it feels that Russia, in their strategic partnership with North Korea, they're trying to balance the power. And that's why, because considering Russia and the United States and North Korea and Europeans, they're somehow trying to balance that. How do you see the way that Donald Trump is pushing about denuclearization? Do you think that the United States would be part of it, or it's just a rhetoric to focus on North Korea?
Nothing will come out of it. When the leaders of the United States and North Korea met, afterwards the North Korean foreign minister met Iranian officials, and he was asked, what was Trump like? And he said it was fine. But as soon as he left the room, it was business as usual. Bolton, who's now in trouble, and the others, they prevented any good from coming out of the meeting, and so Trump is not going to be able. He's first of all, he's not focused. He's constantly changing his position. I don't think he has any strategy at all whatsoever. I don't think he has any idea about any clear vision about the Korean Peninsula. But after what he did to Palestine, after carrying out the airstrike on Iran, he's only proven to the North Koreans that if anything, they should strengthen their nuclear capabilities. He's done more to convince people across the world. I mean, ordinary Iranians today, I can't say overwhelmingly, but a very strong majority of Iranians today, so according to polls, want Iran to have a nuclear weapon. And they often criticize the state and the government and the leadership for not having a nuclear weapon. So the case that has been made to produce nuclear weapons, to preserve nuclear weapons, to increase the number of nuclear weapons, has been made by Trump more than anyone else. So I cannot envisage him having any success. And South Korea, it's obvious that the Russians are going to support North Korea. South Korea helped Ukraine a great deal. A lot of the ammunitions that Ukraine used against the Russians were brought in from South Korea.
Professor Marandi, do you think that Israel would attack Iran with the situation they're in?
I think that is the most important question today, and I think it's quite possible. Iran is preparing itself, and if there is another attack on Iran, this time it's going to be a lot worse for the Israeli regime. Nima, the Israelis don't have. There are no new weapons that the Israelis have that can defend their assets against Iranian missiles and drones, but especially missiles. There are no new weapons out there. But Iran's missile capabilities are not only evolving, but some of Iran's missiles have never been used before. So far, they were not used in the 12-day war. And Iran right now is changing. Everything is evolving inside the country. The military, you now have, as we all know, now that Dr. Larijani is in charge of the Supreme National Security Council, we have a defense council within it, a small group of people who will be able to make decisions about Iran's military much more swiftly and easily. And I think the military has seen its weaknesses. The government has seen its weaknesses. Key assets will be moved. They will be put in more secure places. Intelligence protecting individuals and intelligence gathering will evolve. There's a lot that the Iranians have learned from this 12-day war, and Iran's military capabilities are improving as we speak. So, and the Israelis are in a worse situation than they were a month ago. And especially after the images of starvation have been seen across the world, their image has been shattered even further. If a war, I mean, when the Netanyahu regime started the war against Iran, we saw across the world people supporting Iran. There were even songs that were made, and about bombing Tel Aviv and so on. And it's clear where the sentiments of people across the region and across the world lie. If there's a second wave, it'll be far greater, the support for Iran, than even a few weeks ago. So Iran's military capabilities are greater today. The Israeli regime is in a worse position, and global public opinion has shifted even further away from the regime and closer to Iran. Lots of people see Iran in a very different light today than they did before. They no longer believe the propaganda of Western media. They no longer believe the propaganda of Arab dictatorships in the Persian Gulf region, the Takfiri ideology promoted by Qatar through its so-called cultural centers and its huge media apparatus, which goes far beyond Al Jazeera and the others. People see through it. People see what's happening in Lebanon. They see what's happening in Gaza. They see who's standing with the Palestinian people. They see what's happened in Syria. They see what's happened in Yemen. So another wave would only make things worse for the Israeli regime. I do not welcome war. I hope that the Western genocide in Gaza comes to an end today. But there are lots of people in Iran. There are lots of people in Iran who want Iran to strike the Israeli regime. Lots of people, Nima. People who you would be surprised to hear this from. People come up to me thinking that I have some sort of influence. They say, "Why did we stop?" Not like these highly motivated, pro-Palestinian activists. No, I'm speaking about ordinary people on the streets who expected Iran to continue. I mean, Iran had its reasons. We've gone over this before. After all, Iran, it was a surprise attack, and many of our senior commanders were martyred. And Iran took a big hit on day one, and Iran is now preparing itself for potential second phase. But in any case, the mood in Iran today is very different from before the war. It was a major mistake launching this war against Iran because it's united Iranians in a way which I have not seen since the 1980s, since during Saddam's war against the country. And the Israeli regime is not in good shape on that.
Before wrapping up, Professor Marandi, I think if the Israeli government, or by the putting pressure on the Israeli government, they eventually let the media go to Gaza, to what's going on in Gaza, that would be hugely consequential for the Israeli government. Do you think that would happen? Do you see the possibility of that happening?
You know, Nima, we saw how the Associated Press and how Reuters, they distance themselves from their own reporters in Gaza when they're martyred, when these Palestinians are killed. They're deeply racist. And and you hear, like they say, Western journalists. What's so special about Western journalists? Western media has been supporting this Holocaust since day one. They have zero credibility. Each and every one of those Palestinians who were Palestinian journalists, even if they were working for a single day and then they were martyred, they're of greater value than the entire CNN apparatus, Fox News apparatus, BBC or Sky News, and so on, and France 24, whatever else they have out there. These people gave their lives and they showed us what was happening. We know what's happening in Gaza. We know that they pull the plug of the incubators in hospitals and have the infants die. We know that they carry out double tap attacks on hospitals. And then Netanyahu says it was a mistake, but we know it was not a mistake because it was a double tap attack. They attacked, and then when people gathered, they struck the same place with a drone. It wasn't some shell. They knew exactly what they were doing. We know how, even though the West tried to pretend that initially that these were mistakes or that it was a Palestinian rocket that would hit hospitals, we knew from day one that they were intentionally striking hospitals, that they were intentionally hitting children. We knew it from these Palestinian reporters that were killed. We know that they were hunting kids, and one day they would shoot them in the head. One day they would shoot them in the stomach, and one day they would shoot them in the. We know it from these Palestinian martyrs. And Western journalists and Western media has zero credibility. They do not add any value at all. They are in no position to talk about reporting from Gaza. We've had all the information for 2 years, and they suppress it as much as possible. They are foot soldiers in this genocide. And I'm not saying that all reporters in the West are bad. No, there are some who I know who are decent people, but in general, AP, Reuters, CNN, Fox News, it doesn't matter. The Canadian media, European media, Australian media, they have zero credibility. It's interesting, by the way, Nima, because you began this interview talking about Australia and the nonsense that the Australian Prime Minister said about Iran. Australian media immediately contacted me, 2 different outlets, and I agreed. And then literally minutes later, they said, "Oh, the schedule has changed, the program is." They don't want to hear counter narratives. They don't want to hear us. They just want to repeat their nonsense. But the world has changed. People see right through it. Only these naive old men and women who've been watching TV forever and they're still watching these outlets, only they may believe it. But as we see in the United States, the young, whether independent or Democrat or Republican, they see what's happening in Gaza. And the people of Australia, young people, I'm sure they see exactly what this is all about. So Western media does not contribute to the debate. It is not worth anything. It is detrimental to truth, to the spread of truth and reality. And those within Western media who have some of decency, I hope they are able to continue doing their good work, but their institutions have no value to me.
Thank you.
Perfect. Mm.